This guy wakes up face down in the dirt, totally clueless about how he got there. The last thing he remembers is just chilling in his room playing video games. But when he looks around, right after finishing college, this guy basically lived inside a game called Maze Art Online. This MMO was a total hit, and everyone playing it was completely hooked for hours on end. He stayed. Our guy stumbles into a clearing in a forest he's never seen before. He realizes he's still wearing his normal everyday clothes. His body feels crazy light, like he just woke. The guy tried to keep his cool, convinced that this whole nightmare was just a weird dream. He figured his brain finally snapped after 4 days without sleep, and he'd just passed out. He tried not. He spots this freakish 6-legged dog monster eating a dead animal nearby, and when it lets out a scary growl, Cade completely freezes because he knows he's in big. These 6-legged monsters started closing in on him, growling like crazy. He just stood there totally still, like he was sizing them up. Even while he was asleep, he realized he was still right in front of Coyote. A screen popped up with RPG stats just like in a video game. He realized the system was actually listening to him. The panel showed his name, level, and all his. Our hero keeps his eyes glued to the status bar, staring straight at his manometer. He spots his MP sitting at 10 to 12 points, which is way too high for. Checking his stats, he saw that regular people only have 10 MP, making his own power level look absolutely insane. He spotted a confusing Otherworlder skill on his list. Kaida found out his Otherworlder skill boosted everything, making him learn faster and giving him insane magic potential. The system told him his power level was based on how big of a deal. Kana spots those creepy 6-legged wolves heading his way again. They're crawling out of the trees, slowly closing in on the poor guy. One of the beasts lets out a nasty growl. Kaida realized things were getting sketchy and bolted right away. He still thought he might be dreaming, but the terror he felt was 100% real. While he was running, Kaida's heart dropped when he realized those 6-legged dogs were actually catching up to him. He tried to bolt, but he just couldn't outrun them no matter how hard he tried. Kaida scrambled up a tree just in time to hide from the wolves chasing him. One of the beasts stopped right at the bottom and kept growling up at him. That's when Kaida sat up in the tree and realized he had to move fast before the sun went down. He started panicking about getting out of the woods before total darkness hit. Our hero pulled up his status. Kaida spots a skill called information analysis in his menu. The description says he can scan anything or anyone he looks at. He realizes this is how he saw all that data earlier. Kaida wondered if he could use his analysis skill from a distance. He locked his eyes on the closest wolf and triggered the power. A window popped up with details on a monster called a green wolf. Kaida stared down the wolf and realized its strength was a crazy 32, making a head-on fight way too dangerous. He knew he had some awesome magic and combat talents, but since he didn't have a weapon or know any spells yet, he quickly opened his equipment tab to see what he was working with. Kaida opened his item tab and was shocked to see something literally popping out of the screen. It felt like a real object was about to spawn right in front of his eyes. The screen. Kaida realized he was looking at an inventory screen and was super hyped to actually have an item menu. He saw his max storage was around 10 to 12 slots, which was the exact. Kaida figured he'd give magic a shot, thinking he just had to yell the spell name to make it work. So he screamed out the words exactly like the formula said, but absolutely nothing happened. Out of nowhere, a flame bursts right in front of Coyote, making him leap back in shock. He realizes he's looking at a literal ball of fire just floating there. He starts wondering if Kaida didn't want to waste a single second, so he jumped right back into the magic. He focused everything he had, picturing a massive fireball exploding from his hands. The wolves started. Kaida focuses his mind and aims a fireball straight at one of the green wolves. The spell actually works, and a blast of fire shoots from his hand toward the target. He just stares in total. That fireball slams into a wolf at crazy speeds and just goes boom! The monsters didn't even have time to move before they were stuck right in the middle of the blast. Fire spreads everywhere as he stayed quiet for a second before suddenly throwing his hands up and cheering. But then, a weird noise popped out of his body and he spun around to see what the heck just happened. Hearing that sound, Kaida realized he just leveled up. A stat screen popped up right in front of him, showing his name, age, and every skill he had. He saw his max manas. Kaida spins around and sees the fire ripping through the woods way faster than he thought. The grass and trees are getting swallowed up by the flames, and you can hear them popping and cracking everywhere. Kaida's screaming from the crazy heat while looking for water. But then he remembers he can just use magic. So he focuses all his energy and blasts a massive stream of water right out. Kaido points his hand at the blazing forest and blasts a jet of water, right as a screen pops up confirming he's officially unlocked level 1 water magic. The flames get totally crushed by. Kaido felt a weird sensation drain out of him as he fired off the spell and realized it was his mana moving. He checked his stats to see he was at 507 out. Kaido pulls up his storage menu to see what he's got in his inventory. A screen pops up showing 2 slots with items inside. He lets out a huge breath and slumps back against Aeen. Night fell over the forest as a bright moon lit up the sky. The boy sat there trying to make sense of everything that just happened. He started thinking about those stories where the main character gets sent to. Kaida sat on the grass, just lost in his own head. He kept thinking about the car crash that took his parents 2 years ago. With no family or friends left, he was basically, our hero just smirked and accepted his new reality. Since he couldn't go back home, he figured he should just start living here. He decided to actually try and enjoy his new life. Kaida's just chilling on the grass when a massive scream rips through the air. He snaps his head up, totally on edge as he listens closely. He realizes right then that he definitely isn't. Kaida jumped up the second he heard screaming in the distance. He saw a wagon completely surrounded by people and wild animals. It looked like a pack of wolves was straight up raiding the caravan. Kaido realized those monsters were actually green dogs and knew he had to jump in. He quickly saw that his water magic wouldn't even reach them from this far away. Using fire was way too risky. Kaida stopped for a second and focused hard on exactly how the spell should look. He pictured the tip of a spear flying straight ahead. Suddenly, a jagged rock spike burst out of the Yao. That stone spear slammed right into the green dog's side, but it shattered instantly. The monster let out a massive howl of pain, but it definitely wasn't down for the count. That hurt beast growled but wouldn't back down, still looking totally dangerous. The other dogs stayed right where they were, just watching the whole thing play out. Kaida saw that. The 2 warriors jumped back into the fight and started taking out the rest of the dogs with some heavy hits. One of them shouted to focus everything they had on the biggest beast there. His partner nodded. Both fighters teamed up and charged at the giant dog at the exact same time. One guy lunged forward, pointing his spear right at it. The other hero sprinted in from the side with his sword. Once the dust settled, Kaida walked over to look at the dead dogs. One of the guys thanked him like crazy for saving his skin. But another dude noticed he came straight out of the woods, and Kaida told them he just woke up in the woods and had zero clue how he even got there. He admitted he didn't have a single reason for why he was even in that spot. One of the fighters asks Kaida if any monsters jumped him in the woods since he doesn't have a single scratch. but he just plays it cool and says he was passing through after thanking. Karak blanked on the guy's name and accidentally called him Suzu, but the guy corrected him right away, making sure he knew his name was actually Kaida, so the merchant apologized. The merchant grills Kaida, asking if he's got any cash or an ID on him. Karak jumps in, reminding the guy about the memory loss and offering to back him up. The merchant thinks Kaida dropped his gear in the woods and warns him he's stuck without an ID. He hands the kid some cash to use as a deposit so he can finally join the guild. Kaida stared at the coins and nervously asked if they were actually silver. The merchant got offended and snapped back, asking if the payment wasn't enough for him. Kaida panicked and tried to explain. The girl in the dress asks if his name is Kide, introducing herself as Salyur from the Aeen Guild but telling him to just call her Sally. She asks Karak to take the While the carriage rolls along, Sally starts spilling the beans on everything that's happened. She tells him they're on a forest path right outside of Aeen. Kade hangs on every word, trying. The wagon was parked right by a forest just south of Aeen City. This place is crawling with monsters, so traveling here is a total nightmare. That's why Sally and Korak made sure to bring. Sally broke down how the money works, explaining that it goes from iron to copper, silver, gold, and then huge gold coins, with one iron being worth 10 yen, so Kaidi. Chilling next to Karak, Kaidi sees the cart is loaded with all kinds of gear. He starts wondering why they're using a normal cart when magic storage boxes are a thing. Heroic explains that you need actual magic talent just to open the storage box. These mages are super rare, usually just high-level adventurers or elite soldiers. They're way too expensive for. Cade remembered he could use his information analysis skill to hide his stats from the status screen. He flipped that switch immediately so he wouldn't stand out like a sore thumb. He knew he had to. The carriage pulls up to these massive city gates while guards watch everyone like hawks. Kaidi, Sally, and Karak roll right through the entrance on their ride. A huge sign above the arch reads, "A sleepy guard at the gate asks for his ID," which totally confuses Katie since he doesn't have one. But Sally quickly covers for him by saying he lost it, so the guard demands a boom. Kaede spots a weird magic device on the wall and asks what it is. So Sally explains it's a personality tester used to keep bandits out of the city, while the nearby guards watch them in total silence. Kaede touches the magic device and whispers bandits, totally stuck on what he just heard, while Sally explains he'll get his money back once he shows his guild card, reminding him Karak already. The magic device flashed Coyote's info, showing off his name, age, race, gender, and level. He was stunned he could actually read the text, but then he remembered his. One guard totally loses it when he sees K8A has a last name, because only the super rich nobles have those. He switches up his attitude instantly and starts bowing and apologizing for being so. Cade was totally shocked by the guard's reaction and started wondering what was going on. He figured it had to be his last name, since maybe only the fancy nobles are allowed to use one. As soon as the spell hits, Guido and Salyer's stats pop up on the screen, showing their age, race, and all their special skills. Kade notices right away that Kade's last name was totally gone from the new status screen. One of the guards was shocked it was missing, but he didn't find anything suspicious. The boy had actually used his secret. Kyrie finally makes it to the Adventurers Guild right in the heart of Aeen City. This place is impossible to miss with its huge wooden gate towering over everything else. Inside is packed with people, and there's even a massive lizard warrior decked out in full armor. A staff member walks up to them right away to get their registration started. The whole building is buzzing with energy and everyone looks like they mean business. Sally thanks K8 for the help and explains how to sign up for the guild. She tells him he'll get a guild card that acts as his ID and lets him pick up quests. Sally sets a magic box on the table and tells Kaede to touch it. She explains it works exactly like the scanner they used at the city gate. Kaede knows he needs to make some. As soon as Kaede touches the box, a huge list of skills pops up, and while Sally tries to thank him, she completely freezes when she sees that this screen has way more info than the guild. Sally hands Cade his brand new guild card and starts explaining the ropes. It lists his name, race, and gender, with his official rank sitting right at the bottom, Cade. Sally kept breaking down how the guild's ranking system actually works, explaining that to level up, you've got to crush quests and take down scary monsters. She mentioned that once you hit rank D, Sally kept breaking down how the guild ranks work, explaining that you level up by crushing quests and taking down monsters. Once you hit rank D, you've got to pass a tough exam to move up. Sally keeps explaining, showing him that the fourth line tracks his finished quests, while the fifth counts every monster he's crushed. And the best part is, it all updates automatically the moment he wins. So Coyote just stares at the map and takes it all in. Kaede was blown away to find out duels were real and that bandits are basically treated like monsters. But Sally explained that taking out a wanted bandit is totally legal, and even if you kill one in a fair fight, you won't get labeled a criminal. Sally explained, "You can't fake a guild card because you'll get caught every single time." She even warned him that the punishment for trying is straight-up death. Cade was low. Sally finally makes Cade an official adventurer, but she warns him he's gotta own his actions now that he's in the guild. Cade thanks her for the info and heads out, leaving Sally. A guild worker noticed the guy called Sally by her first name, which is super rare, so she started teasing her about finally finding a boyfriend until Sally told her to mind her own business and get back to. Sally was so hyped because she finally found the guy she'd been searching for. She knew the second she saw K8A that he wasn't like anyone else. Her gut. Sally remembered how K8 actually listened to her and took every single word seriously. She was totally blown away by his insane talent for magic and his crazy fighting skills. Deep down, a voice. He hits up the inn the gate guard mentioned and crashes on the bed, feeling totally drained from all the chaos. But when he checks his inventory, he sees all his loot is safe, including that super weird herb. Lying in bed, our hero thought back to that crazy fight with the green dogs and realized he almost died. So with bandits and duels everywhere, he decided he's got to be way more careful from now on. As the sun rose, the kid stared out the window and wondered if he'd actually survive in this insane, dangerous world. The dude's stomach started growling from that amazing smell, so he headed inside, and the waitress greeted him right at the door. Cade walks into a cafe and gets greeted by elf girls in maid outfits, and he's totally stunned to see who they are until one of them asks if he's there for breakfast. He hyped himself up and sat down, asking for the menu until the elf waitress pointed out it was right there on the table, and he was totally loving every second of it, forgetting all his stress and just vibing with his brand new life. After crushing a massive breakfast, Cade felt totally energized and headed straight to the guild to pick up some new quests. Our hero headed straight for the guild to stack some cash, knowing he'd need way better gear before he could even think about leaving the city. This traveler stops in the middle of an alley, totally wiped out and realizing he's completely lost. He looks around panicking because the whole place feels super sketchy and deserted. To find his way out, he decides to just knock on a door and ask for directions. The guy knocks on the door asking for directions, but this beefy dude just hits him with a super suspicious question. Even though he explains he's just lost, the owner isn't buying it at all and demands to know how he even found this place. The shopkeeper snapped at him to buy something or get lost, so the traveler just stayed quiet and scanned the room filled with swords, spears, and shields. Kite noticed the shop owner was a total grump, but he quickly promised he was there to buy weapons, So the guy cut right to the chase and asked how much cash he had. The guy claimed he had 1,300 bodies and was gonna get more soon. But the merchant just stared at him like he was crazy, since that wouldn't even buy a basic knife. Our hero explained he woke up in the woods with 0 memories and no cash, but he'd managed to scrape some money together, and the merchant, seeing how smooth he moved, realized he had to be crazy strong to survive out there, though he promised not to pry into the kid's past. The blacksmith says he only sells gear to people who actually know how to use it and tells him to keep the shop a secret, but after checking out the guy's build, he offers. Kade promised to come back once he had the cash, and even though the blacksmith acted all grumpy while telling him not to die, Kade could tell he actually cared before asking for directions to the guild. Kade rolls up to the guild and says hey to Sally while she's juggling a ton of paperwork. Then he asks for the quest and she tells him to follow her so she can explain the whole deal. Sally drags him to the quest board and explains the rules, but since Katie is just a G rank, he's stuck with basic jobs like gathering herbs or moving boxes. He picks a quest to go herb hunting, and Sally explains they need Zunana, a plant used to stop bleeding. The guild is running super low on it, so they're paying a solid 30 bodies for every single one he finds. Katie's totally shocked and asks if the herb is super rare, but Sally explains it's actually pretty common. The real catch is that poisonous Zunana plants grow all around it, making it a total nightmare to harvest, so most people only find it by pure luck. Katie pulls the herb from his inventory to show Sally, and she confirms it's exactly what they need. He thanks her and realizes he knows just where to find more. The very same forest where he first woke up. He headed back to the woods to hunt for that grass, but he came up totally empty-handed. Cade was wiped out and realized he hadn't found a single thing yet. He looked over his herbs and realized he'd accidentally picked some poison, but it was so weak he could only use it to pull some small pranks. He fired up his info analysis skill to hunt down the herbs he needed. He even tried using the skill like a high-tech radar, but at first, it was a total fail. The second he grabbed a sample, a symbol popped up, making him realize it was the Zunana herb and that the mark only appeared when he was the one looking at it. He popped the skill again, and seeing all those glowing symbols, he knew he could grab all that grass in no time. Sally was blown away by his massive plant collection and worried he'd accidentally grabbed something toxic, but Cade promised he used his appraisal skill to check every single one. He confirmed every sample was over 15 centimeters just like the rules said, and as Sally started checking them, the device suddenly went off. Sally's jaw dropped when he claimed he used an evaluation skill to sort herbs, especially since he didn't even have that power before. And as she grilled him about his massive haul, the guy just stood there looking completely lost. Coyote claimed he actually had the skill even if it didn't show up on his status, saying it's how he scored all that grass. But the girl just gave him a look like The guild girl apologized for getting way too worked up and fixed the payout for the 6,090 telephone grass, making our guy super relieved he wasn't caught, even though Sally was still pretty suspicious. The next day, the kid heads back to the shop to grab his custom shield, but as soon as he starts being polite, the grumpy blacksmith yells at him to shut up and get inside already. While the guest looks around the room, the blacksmith keeps hammering away, and the boy spots the name Devoured carved into the metal, wondering if that's the master's name while he stays totally locked in on the forge. As soon as the work was done, Dover asked if he had the money. The kid said he was good to go and mentioned that his magic would make this shield super useful. The blacksmith was... Kade was hyped to find out he had magic and asked for a staff, but the blacksmith told him he's such a natural fighter that he should definitely stick to the sword. The guy was totally shocked because he'd never heard of a mage without a staff, since it's super hard to focus while moving and your spells end up way slower without one. He realized his magic was still strong, but he'd never hit a target if his spells were too slow, so he decided to use the staff's speed boost to totally level up his game. He figured he'd grab a staff later, but he stayed on guard after the blacksmith warned him that being too cocky is what gets even the best fighters killed. They started chatting about shields, so the blacksmith handed him one to try out. As he strapped it on, he realized just how awesome and chill this guy really was. Caddy found a shield that felt just right, and the blacksmith picked it out instantly just by looking, which totally blew his mind again. The blacksmith was stoked with how it turned out and asked the guy what he thought, so the dude checked out his new shield and admitted it looked pretty solid. The moment the new guy grabbed the shield, it felt like it was literally part of his own body, and he knew right then that Master Dovra was the real deal. The kid starts geeking out about how to make swords and asks about tempering, but the blacksmith has absolutely no clue what he's talking about. The kid explains his trick about heating and cooling the metal fast, but when the blacksmith actually tries it, the whole thing ends up totally bent out of shape. He was totally shocked by how tough the metal had become and figured that if they just heated it a little and let it cool down slowly, it might actually soften up. Dover had no idea where the kid learned all this, but he was totally hooked. So he shut down the forge for 2 days and promised that if this sword experiment actually worked, he'd give it away for absolutely free. Katie watched the blacksmith walk away and thought the guy was kind of a jerk, but since Dovro was clearly just obsessed with his work, he decided to just brush it off. The next morning, he hits the city to scout out the local adventurers, and even though using his evaluation skill on people feels totally wrong, he's determined to get all the intel he can. He did a quick scan and realized mages and regular fighters were basically on the same level, since almost nobody actually had any rare magic or battle talents. He scanned the market stalls but only saw basic magic meat, so Kaidi just grabbed a bun stuffed with green wolf. He noticed that water in this world cleans clothes like magic, but it really just made him miss the simple luxury of taking a hot bath back in his old world. Katie was so busy picking grass that he didn't even notice the sun go down, so once he saw it was pitch black, he headed straight back to the city. Suddenly, a green wolf lunges at Cade from above, but he dodges the attack and gets ready to strike the second it hits the ground. He blasts a fireball at his enemies, but a whole pack of wolves shows up, and being stuck deep in the woods means things are about to get really ugly. The beasts start circling him with scary growls, and he quickly realizes he's in a total bind. He blasts another fireball, levels up right in the middle of the fight, and thinks there are only 2 enemies left until he realizes one is still hiding. A wolf suddenly drops from the trees, and Kaid is totally caught off guard by the sneak attack. The beast slams him to the ground and starts beating him up, so he desperately tries to focus and picture his spell to get his magic working. Kaid fires off his stone spear spell, slamming into the wolves from every direction and totally wrecking them. He crushed one wolf, but the rest swarmed him in a heartbeat, and Kaidi knew he'd been way too sloppy and almost died for it. He showed up with all the plants and totally stunned everyone, while the girl taking them admitted she's officially given up on trying to make sense of him. Kaide admitted he spent all day gathering Zunana and wandered way too far into wolf territory, but he just casually told them he took the whole pack out with magic. Sally was totally blown away that he took on a whole pack of green wolves solo, since she had no clue how a mage could actually survive a fight like that. He told her he was blocking with a shield while blasting magic at the same time, but she was shocked because pulling that off should be impossible. She tried to get him a healer or a potion, but he told her he was totally fine and got so hyped about restoration spells that he decided to learn all about magic. Our MC realized his mana was over 2,000 and refilling crazy fast, so he decided to start dropping massive spells while looking for a way to fix his terrible perception. He decided to grind his magic and use his broken cheat skill to become the ultimate magic swordsman. The kid heads into the woods to figure out his powers, focusing on search magic since he's honestly terrible at noticing things. He started testing his aim, picturing the magic shooting from his hand and hitting the tree dead on. He steered his magic toward the target and was totally shocked when it started appearing out of thin air. He was totally hyped that his magic let him feel the rough tree bark, so he cranked up the range to see just how far his detection could go. But as the magic spread too far, a massive wave of info slammed into his brain and he started totally losing control. The kid's wobbling on his feet and looks totally drained after using that spell, realizing he'd never survive a real fight with it because his brain is so overloaded with junk info he feels. Cade realized the spell was going haywire because he didn't pick a target, so he tried again, blasting his magic out and using his analysis skill to filter through the data. He triggers his magic and a circular map pops up right in front of him. He notices the map only tracks things within a certain distance. Suddenly, the spell starts evolving on its own, which totally... The guy cheered because he finally pulled it off. He finished making a simple magic radar, and a round map popped up on his screen to show the spell was working perfectly. Our guy checks out his new skill and realizes his radar now hits 50 meters for 0 mana, meaning nobody's sneaking up on him anymore with this magic of perception spell. Our hero remembers the blacksmith's 3-day promise and heads over, totally curious about how the cool tempering process actually works. The hero walks up to the forge to check on his blade, and the blacksmith, who's totally wiped out, yawns and says it's finally good to go. Our hero is totally shocked by how tough this sword is, realizing it's actually made of steel instead of the weak iron the blacksmith used before. Devoured brags that he just finished this sword yesterday and it's one of his best works yet, so he tells the hero to use it until they can track down some B-class materials. Our hero is super nervous, but he grabs the sword from the blacksmith and grips it tight, even though he's literally never swung a blade in his life. The kid swung his sword and his body just moved on its own, leaving him shocked at how natural it felt while the blacksmith watched him with total interest. The master could tell right away that this kid was no amateur and figured he'd swung a blade before, while the boy just smirked, totally surprised at how much his martial arts skills were actually paying off. Cade felt a bit weird about taking such a powerful sword, but the blacksmith told him it was no big deal since he could make it way more stable now, leaving Cade wondering if the hero was totally chill about sharing his secrets, saying these moves were made to be used and he had absolutely nothing to lose by letting everyone else in on them. Devoured asked if the kid was a mage since he wasn't wearing armor, but the boy said he just prefers light gear so he can move around fast. He was so hyped about his shield that he totally forgot to protect the rest of his body, so the blacksmith hooked him up with some perfect leather armor. Devoured explains he only messes with metal armor, but he hooks our hero up with a leather specialist and tells him to drop his name, leaving the guy wondering if he's about. He walks into the shop and a girl greets him, instantly calling him out for being a total newbie. He tells her Devoured sent him to get some armor, and she's actually shocked that She instantly saw that the sword looked just like Dothra's work and asked to see it, and after getting the okay, she checked it out like a total expert. Making the hero, she slashed right through a target to test the blade and was totally hyped by the quality, while the hero stood there in shock before realizing the shop was empty and she was actually the one who forged it. The girl was totally hyped to see the sword really came from the Dover of Forge, and since she'd never seen such high-quality steel before, Cade figured she had to be the blacksmith told him a legendary sword needs the perfect armor to match and offered to custom make a set. So when he asked what she could use, she said she could craft it out of basically anything. Cade checked out the green wolf skin, but it had trash defense and was super weak to fire. The girl warned her that one spark would make the whole thing go up in flames, so she says her shop is just for beginners, so she can't afford the pricey stuff. But he's totally confused why she's acting so proud of it. He spots the armor on the mannequin and asks if it's for sale. But the girl explains that while it has auto shields, it drains so much mana that nobody actually wears it. He was hyped because his crazy mana regen made this armor a perfect fit for him. The girl told him the armor was basically just a display piece for the shop now. He popped his analysis skill to see what this gear could actually do. He realized the armor drains 20 mana every hour, but since his mana is basically infinite, he can wear it forever while normal adventurers wouldn't stand a chance. He asked about the price and the defense, and she told him it's just as tough as Gargonian leather, so it'll cost him the same amount. He ignored her warning and decided to test the armor anyway, promising to swap to the leather set if it sucked, which finally made her relax. She finished measuring him and promised the armor would be ready by tomorrow night, telling him to come back when the bell rings, and he was totally down for it. Kaidi asked if she sold anything besides armor since he really needed a staff, so she told him to just hit up the magic shop next door. The second he said what he wanted, the sorceress just spawned in and freaked everyone out, making the girl totally mad that she broke into her shop without permission. The guy was totally blown away to see a real-life sorceress who looked exactly like a classic mage, and she just gave him a super friendly smile. The sorceress told him she had all kinds of gear and dragged him right into her shop, mentioning that Devoured sent him, which made the guy realize just how famous that name really was. The merchant leads Kaidi into a massive room with floating magic lamps, and the boy is totally stunned by how huge the whole place is. Coyote walks up to the display case, and while the lady asks which staff he's eyeing, he's just standing there totally blown away by all the epic models. She explains that a longer staff makes your magic fire off way faster, but the bigger it gets, the harder it is to actually control. The merchant showed off a 60-centimeter staff, saying that even though it's slow, it's perfect for fighting in cramped dungeons, and Kaidi totally agreed it was the right call. Kate grinned and asked for a staff that could triple her magic speed, but the merchant just laughed her off, saying a tiny 20-centimeter stick would be totally useless. He's already rocking a sword and shield, so he needs a staff that won't get in his way while he triples his already crazy magic speed. Cade could tell the merchant thought he was being super weird, but she still promised to have the staff ready by tomorrow, as long as he didn't blame her if it ended up being totally useless. He figured getting that staff would finally make him happy, especially since magic swordsmen are super rare here because you need insane focus to pull it off. The merchant burst out laughing when K80 suggested just cutting a piece off the staff, and while the kid was super hyped to get his gear, he didn't really understand how The next morning, Cade rolls into the guild to ask about a rank up, and the staffer admits he's definitely put in enough work to move up. She explained that to get his first rank up, he just had to finish a basic mission, and Coyote realized this was just how the whole XP system worked. Coyote checked out the G-rank mission list and saw it was just boring stuff like picking up trash or hauling boxes, so he had to figure out which one to pick. Kayet picked the iron ore delivery mission even though it was a weird choice, and a guild member warned him that while it's perfect for ranking up, it's actually super unpopular. Sally tried to talk him out of the mission because it was way too risky, but K-Day told her not to worry since his spatial inventory makes everything easy. Kai figured out his inventory size is actually tied to his max mana, and the guild member broke down exactly how the slot system works. Cade realized his inventory slots matched his starting mana exactly, and even with a limit on each one, he knew this quest was a total win and headed out after saying thanks. Cade zoomed across the field with the furry creature at 20 kilometers per hour, feeling so much energy that he thought he could actually crush Olympic athletes in a marathon. Cade noticed that since he leveled up, He could basically run all day without even getting tired. So when he reached the village, he told the guy at the gate he was there for a guild mission and flashed his ID. The man points to a massive pile of iron ore and tells our hero to grab as much as he can carry, so he nods along while the worker stays totally convinced the stuff is legit. The guy watched K-Day and was shocked by how weak he looked, wondering if he could even survive. But then, a massive bad feeling hit him, and he started watching every second with total tension. K-Day started loading up the ore and said he fit 1,500 kilos in his box, which totally floored the worker since those things usually only hold 200. The man asked for a ride and promised to keep working for Kaete, who agreed to help even though he wasn't sure how long he'd actually be staying in the city. K-Day noticed his box only had one slot filled, and when the guy asked in total shock if he could fit more, the boy told him there was plenty of room. Kite just laughed and flexed that he still had over 1,000 free cells left, making the guy freak out and ask if he was literally the box itself. But Kite just told him he's still a regular human. The workers at the plant were totally losing it over the massive mountain of ore Coyote dropped off. But he just acted cool and told them it was 10 tons like it was no big deal. A worker asked how many trips he made and was totally shocked that Katie did it all in one go, especially since he could have carried even more if he didn't have to save space for. Coyote turned in the ore and finally hit F rank, leaving the merchant totally stunned when he tried out the shortened staff and realized it was actually a perfect fit. K-Day thanked her and said this gear was perfect, feeling totally hyped for his next big challenge while his partner just watched him with a proud smile. The girls smiled at how cute the staff looked, and then Ked suddenly zoomed off into the forest, ready for their next big adventure. He wanted to see if his gear was the real deal, so he headed deep into the woods until his radar suddenly pinged, and he went charging toward the target ready for a fight. He was suddenly staring down a massive pack of green wolves and started to freak out because there were way too many for him to handle. He counted at least 500 of them and realized, with no other choice, K-Day jumps into the fray and chugs a mana potion he grabbed from the magic shop earlier, cranking his energy recovery up 10 times. He fired up the magic gear, realizing it was total trash for normal mages but perfect for him. And as the wolves closed in, he dropped into a stance and got ready to throw down. Once the pack got close, he fired off his rock spear spell, sending sharp stones blasting out of the ground to hammer the wolves and leave them totally dazed. He was hyped that the spell actually worked, and as Katie watched the wolves freak out, she remembered how hard he'd studied to master magic during his training. The kid started breaking down how his magic actually worked, realizing that even if he used 10 times the mana, the blast wouldn't get 10 times bigger, and he was capped at charging only 10 mana every second. Our hero spammed his fireball spell, launching a massive wave of flames to take out the huge crowd of enemies surrounding him. Toasted wolf bodies were scattered everywhere, and as his system pinged with a notification, he stood back to check out the damage. Even after taking heavy hits, the rest of the wolves kept charging, so the hero fired off another spell while backing away to stay out of their reach. He whipped around and unleashed a barrage of firebolts, blasting the attackers back with a wave of massive explosions. Our hero looked at the mess of dead wolves and realized these beasts were just mindless monsters that were way too easy to predict. Standing on the burnt ground, he realized the whole fight was already over, and it had only been 3 minutes since it started. Kitey smirked at the results, feeling hyped that he finished the fight in just 3 minutes, especially since his stats showed off some insane magic and super high speed. He realized he just took on 513 green wolves and wondered if they always traveled in such huge packs, so he decided to head back and tell his partner, but first he had to grab. This massive beast with thick scales was a total predator, and as it slowly crept forward, its heavy thuds made the whole ground shake. Sally's jaw dropped as she asked if he seriously wiped out 513 green wolves, since they never swarm in groups that big, but he just casually mentioned he found them only 15 minutes after entering the forest. K-Day couldn't tell if he was just super unlucky or leveling up like a beast, but the girl told him that while 100 wolves is normal, 500 is totally unheard of, so she was just happy he was safe and offered to buy 100 of those green wolf bodies, and he just coolly said yes. The kid hits up Devoured to get his busted sword and shield fixed. The master takes one look at the gear and instantly knows he's been out hunting green wolves, based on how Devoured checked out the gear and saw green wolf claw marks on the shield and a sword that had clearly slashed through crowds, making him realize Cade had already taken down hundreds of monsters. The kid thought his boosted stats made him a pro, but Devoured wasn't buying it. He admitted he totally underestimated Cade at first, but now he's actually impressed by how much. Once the repairs were done, the blacksmith told him the sword was fixed, but the shield was already fine. And even though he almost told Cade to just ditch the weapon for a new one, Devoured warned Coyote that his sword was just basic iron, which is way weaker than those rare special metals, so he told him he'd better carry a backup blade just in case. Kidoi asked how much a dragon sword costs, and Devoured told him it starts at 4 billion bodies since dragon parts for forging are super rare. The blacksmith says these dragons are so rare they're basically legends, and just one showing up could wipe out entire countries and wreck the whole world. K-Day asks what they can use since dragon metal is way too pricey, so Devoured suggests using the super hard shell from a B-rank metal lizard instead. The blacksmith explains that they use metal lizard skin to forge swords because these beasts are insanely tough, and since regular fighters can't even scratch them, one showing up in a town without mages would be a total nightmare. Kai didn't think he'd run into these monsters so soon, but he was already itching to take them down later, especially after Devoured mentioned that these metal lizards are even tougher than dragons, and a sword made from them would sell for at least 5 million. The next day, Kaidi rolls up to the guild only to find it locked shut, but a massive emergency notice on the board tells every fighter to haul it over to the forest gate ASAP. A massive crowd was swarming the gate, so Cade rushed over to Sally to see what was up, and she was totally shocked as she shouted his name and filled him in on everything. Sally explained that after K-Day's warning about the green wolves, they sent out scouts and found a massive monster army heading for the city, giving the guild just enough time to get ready. Fighters started swarming the city gates to prep for the raid, and K-Day realized that with so many enemies coming, it was a total miracle they found out early, or the whole city would, Sally warns that the gate won't stand a chance against these ramming monsters. So she sends Katie to the front lines and promises a massive reward for the whole squad. The kid's pretty nervous since he's just a rookie, but Sally explains that the local monsters are total pushovers and he's actually one of their strongest fighters. She begs him to help out on the front lines, and Katie is honestly shocked that the guild is this pathetic. Cade realized he was totally backed into a corner and finally agreed to help. So Sally thanked him and said he'd be their secret weapon for the defense, while one of the fighters told Sally K-Day suddenly bolts into the forest, leaving Sally and the crew totally stunned as she yells out in pure confusion. He sprints forward, knowing he can't turn his back on the place he loves, so he decides to jump straight into the front lines to get stronger and keep those monsters from ever reaching the city. Kite knew his mana wasn't bottomless even with that potion, so he figured he had about 20 minutes of max power and had to be super smart with how he used it. He was ready to slash anyone nearby and blast the far-off enemies with magic, and even as the wolves started surrounding him, he stayed totally locked in and ready to strike. Cade just leveled up and felt his magic getting way stronger, but his hype is cut short when a massive boar bursts out of the trees and he realizes he's got a whole new fight on his hands. Kitey instantly fires off Stone Spear, but even a barrage of hits can't stop the beast as it keeps charging forward. He knew this had to be the monster the girl warned him about, so he scanned it and found a Gorgon with insane power but basically zero mana. After 7 spells only took out 30% of its health, the monster's HP suddenly tanked to 0, leaving Cade wondering if he landed a lucky crit or if the beast was even dead yet. Kisar realized these monsters were acting totally weird because, unlike those green wolves from before, they were all hauling it in a straight line like they were running for their lives from something even scarier. He tracked their path back, desperate to figure out what was going on. He scrambled up higher and spotted a massive trail of monsters all sprinting in the same direction. Seeing them move with that much coordination totally, as he kept moving, he realized he was right. The wolves were definitely running away, and he started wondering what could be scary enough to spook that many monsters and what was waiting for him further down the path. Suddenly, this massive metal lizard jumps out at him, and even though it has 0 magic, it's so fast and strong that it's honestly terrifying. Cade knew right away this was the metal lizard Devoured warned him about. He realized that every monster in the area was actually running for their lives from this thing. It might have less HP. The kid realized fighting solo was a huge mistake and tried to rush back to the guild, but something lurking in the woods stopped him dead in his tracks. The metal lizard let out a massive roar and lunged forward, leaving Cade totally stunned when he realized this thing was way faster than him. He tried to back away, but the monster was catching up fast, and he realized his normal hits and even his rock spear wouldn't do a thing against that insane armor. Cade spent a whole minute charging up his magic to make it hit way harder, and once he was ready, he blasted out a massive great fireball. The magic slammed right into the metal lizard, but it didn't have a single scratch, leaving the boy totally stunned that his move did absolutely nothing. The monster suddenly charges and blasts Cade back, landing a hit so fast the poor guy didn't even have time to block. The attack barely even touched his leg, but it still managed to snap his bone. Kitey was seriously lucky he knew healing magic, because a direct hit would have ended him right there. He knew he absolutely couldn't let that monster get anywhere near the city. Cade swore he'd win for sure, but since he didn't have a spell that could pierce through, he decided to invent a brand new one just like he did with his earth magic. He tried to fire off the new magic, but it totally failed, leaving him shocked and wondering if there was some secret trick to it besides just using his imagination. He knew his basic spells weren't gonna cut it, but then he remembered a secret move. So even with danger closing in, Cade started charging his special magic since you can actually store mana to make your next hit way more powerful than any sword. He figured the lizard's skin was basically tank armor, so Cade used that magic pressure 3 inches to spell I saw back in training to crush it. He's betting everything in one last spell by dumping all his mana into it, but now he has to survive for 15 minutes while dodging those crazy tail attacks. Cade read the move and managed to block it, but even though he stopped the hit, it still hurt like crazy. Cade finishes getting ready and shouts that 15 minutes are up, locking his eyes on a tiny gap in the monster's armor that usually never gets hit. He figured the metal lizard's back was its weakest spot and rushed in to strike from behind. He let out a huge roar and poured every last bit of energy he had into one massive hit. This was his final chance to finally crack the monster's thick armor. The pressure spell slammed into the lizard and ripped a hole right through its body, letting out a massive blast of energy that swallowed the monster whole. The kid gritted his teeth and watched the monster closely, praying his last hit was enough to finally end the fight. The monster let out a wild scream as it thrashed in pain, while a totally exhausted Cade watched closely to see if the fight was finally over. Cade's gasping for air as that metal lizard finally hits the dirt with its armor totally smashed, and he can't even hide his grin as he realizes he actually pulled it off. The fight is finally over. Cade pushed through the forest, glued to his radar to make sure nothing was creeping up on him. He figured that crazy metal lizard had scared off every monster in the area, so it should finally be. Kylie asked why she thought he was dead, and the girl shouted that he vanished after the monsters left because he totally charged ahead by himself. Sally totally loses it and screams at him for making her worry, and as she tries not to cry, he just hangs his head and says sorry, completely shocked that she's this upset. She totally snaps at him for following her orders way too literally and almost dying. And while Cade tries to make an excuse, he has to admit she actually said it. She asked what he was doing while the other monsters were running away, and he just casually told her he was exploring after spotting a metal lizard. Sally was totally losing it and about to call the mages for help, but Cade just casually told her he already wrecked the metal lizard, leaving her completely speechless. He grinned and told her the monsters ran away because he beat the big one, leaving her totally stunned. Sally finally realized Cade was winning because he mixed magic with his sword, but when she asked if he could use wind magic, he was totally caught off guard. She says it usually takes a whole squad of C-rank mages to lift that lizard with wind and roast its insides with fire, so she's shocked Cade pulled it off all by himself. He explained that he just blasted through the back of the armor with his magic, wondering if this monster was actually a total weakling, and even offered to pull the body out of his inventory. Sally was shocked to see it really was a metal lizard and figured the damage had to be on its back. But while they were checking it out, Cade offered to help, which totally weirded her out. The boy pointed out a weak spot in the lizard's armor, but the girl awkwardly asked to go first, so he apologized and she sat down next to him, still looking totally stunned. She stared at the massive hole in the monster and admitted she'd never seen magic this destructive, realizing this power was on a completely different level than their own. She thanked Cade for wrecking that lizard and said she had to go report in, but right as he tried to leave, she told him he was coming with her. Inside the guild, the kid bows and apologizes right away, but the old man tells him to get up since they already knew something was totally off with those monsters. The guild leader admitted he totally messed up by ignoring the facts about that monster, and thanked Cade for saving the whole guild from a total disaster. The guy admits that win was a total struggle, but says the situation is obvious. Nobody could have predicted such a beast would show up out of nowhere. The old man gives him major props. Cade was totally shocked when the guild leader told him to keep the metal lizard's defeat a secret just to keep the townspeople from freaking out or getting the wrong idea. The guild leader warned that even a whisper about a metal lizard would cause total chaos, and he was sure nobody would believe a regular adventurer could actually take down a beast like that. The guy said it was just a request and the guild could make it official, but Cade just smiled and turned down the fame. Cade confessed he was dying to tell Devoured the truth, but the guild leader was totally fine with it, saying he's a pro at keeping secrets since he's a total loner who barely talks to. The guild leader told Cade that no one in the city could handle that metal lizard, so he pointed him southeast toward a dwarven mining town with the perfect workshops for the job. Cade headed off to the forge town of Herrera to turn those metal lizard scraps into a sick new weapon, especially since he'd already cleared out every strong monster in the area. He rushed to say goodbye to everyone who helped him since he was almost out of time, figuring it was way smarter to travel at night and hide during the day, and it turns out the blacksmith Devoured. Katie walks up to the girl with a handful of grass and tells her he's leaving the city, making her immediately ask if it's because of his talk with the guild leader. He told her he was heading to Herrera to craft a sick new weapon, and she was low-key freaking out because adventurers almost never leave the safety of the city. He told her the metal lizard he already beat was the one messing with the green wolves, and she agreed the city was finally safe, even if he wasn't there. Katie looked back at his first days in this world and realized how lucky he was to meet a sweet girl like Sally, who told him to hold off on selling that weed. He thanked her for everything and said he hoped they'd meet again, and she just smiled as she took the grass, saying she couldn't wait to see him too. Sally flashed a smile as she said goodbye, really hoping they'd cross paths again, while the guy just watched her and silently started his long trek into the mountains. By day 5, Kaede realized he was already halfway to Herrera, moving twice as fast as a horse and closing in on the city in record time. Deep in the woods, his map showed a crowd on the road, and he was shocked to see weird shadows that looked like a straight-up kidnapping. He ducked behind a tree and spotted a bunch of armed guys with a tied-up kid, so he started tailing them to see what was going on. He figured these guys were just bandits, and he was totally sure once he saw them guarding a prisoner. He needed to be 100% sure they were actually bandits because the guild rules say he has to take them down or catch them, so he got ready to move. He used his skill to confirm all 6 guys were definitely bandits, and he braced himself for his first real fight against actual people. One bandit sneaks off saying he has to pee, but the rest of the crew thinks he's acting totally sus. Suddenly, a creepy noise echoes through the trees, freaking everyone out. The boss. 2 bandits find a tree that's been sliced clean through, and just as one of them gets close to check it out, the kid drops from the branches for a massive surprise attack. Kaede blasted the whole group at once with his pressure magic. The force sent the bandits flying back in total pain and knocked them right off their feet. Even with a weak mark, the rest of the bandits scrambled to their feet, totally terrified as the kid walked closer. One guy tried to ask who he was, but he didn't even get to finish before the kin. Standing over his defeated enemies, our hero finally let out a sigh of relief. He really only meant to capture them, but even his weakest magic ended up being way too deadly. This was his first. Kaede walked over to the girl he just rescued, but she wasn't snapping out of it, and his skill showed she was under a forced hypnosis that he had no idea how to. He finally made it to the city carrying the girl, still totally confused about how that hypnosis spell worked, and immediately begged the guards at the gate to help him save her. This bearded guy sees the girl knocked out and goes ballistic, screaming at Kaede and blaming him for what happened to his daughter, while Kaede just stands there totally clueless about the whole thing. The dwarf rushes over and realizes the girl is his daughter, immediately blaming Kaede, who panics and tries to explain he actually saved her from bandits in the woods, though he mentions she's under some super weird spell. 2 guards rushed in to settle things down, telling Kaede that medicine could easily fix the hypnosis while thanking him for the rescue and offering to carry the girl. Once the confusion cleared, Kaede found out his daughter was still lost in the woods, and he totally lost hope. The other guards tried to chill everyone out by saying dwarves are just naturally. The dwarf introduces himself and thanks the kid for saving his daughter, promising to help him out in the city before dragging him off to a massive party and totally ignoring his question about the forge. Everyone's partying and raising their drinks because the girl is finally safe, and even though the dwarf is totally ignoring him, Kaede realizes the guy is just way too hyped to have his daughter back, especially when he spots some tools that look exactly like the ones from Dover Egg's workshop. Sumisa walked up to thank him for the save, and even though she had no idea what actually happened to her, she looked like she was already back to normal. Sumisa promised she was feeling okay and said sorry for slowing him down. Then she asked if he was actually an adventurer. The girl told him to hit up a local workshop for his weapon, and Kaya was shocked they could actually forge lizard metal, so he immediately started asking about the price. The warrior realized he was totally broke after hearing the price, but Sumizu's dad offered to craft the weapon for half off as a huge thank you for saving his daughter. Kaid asked to sell his loot and claimed he had a metal lizard body, but since they didn't believe him, he decided to just show them his inventory right then and there. Everyone freaked out when that massive metal lizard appeared, and one guy couldn't believe they were actually carrying the whole body of a beast like that. The warrior bragged about his massive inventory and felt a weird sense of déjà vu, while a pro confirmed the body was still in perfect condition. The buyer offered a massive 3 million bodies per kilo, and even though he wouldn't take it all at once, the deal was way better than the guilds, so a shocked Kaede jumped on it. With the deal sealed, Sumizu got everyone ready to work and asked the kid if he knew fire magic because it was finally time to butcher that lizard. Our hero asks what he needs to torch, and he finally gets the answer. To get the metal out, they have to burn out the guts first. The dwarf calculates they can score a bull. Sumizu is totally floored by the kid's insane power and figures he must have soloed that lizard using some high-level B-rank magic. He's obsessed with how fast. The blacksmith was blown away because he'd never seen a fighting style like this, and he thought a 20-centimeter staff was way too tiny. He asked what it was even made of, but the guy just said he bought it at some shop in Aeen and had no idea where it really came from. Kaede wonders if the material of a staff changes how fast he can cast, so he asks about making one out of a metal lizard, but Sumizu explains his current gear is just basic iron and copper for beginners, and that with enough cash, he could build a staff that fires off spells way faster. The blacksmith says he can totally make a staff out of that lizard metal, but it's gonna take a while since the material is crazy tough and needs special handling. He also mentions that staffs and the warrior thanked the blacksmith, who told him to hit up Sumisa if he was serious about getting a staff. Turns out, she's the absolute best at making them in the entire. Kaede asked her to craft a short staff out of that metal lizard material for super fast magic. But Sumisu was totally stunned and asked if he even had a clue how staffs are actually made. Kaede asked Sumisu to teach him how to make staffs since her dad hyped up her skills, and even though she was totally shocked, she agreed to show him the ropes. Sumisa starts with the basics, explaining that the longer your staff is, the faster you can blast out your spells. She shows off a diagram of the staff's 3 parts, the core, the speed layer, and the shell, explaining that a better core makes magic move way faster, while the outer, she explains that magic density is basically the staff's storage limit, and if you overcharge it, the power starts leaking out unless you use better materials to keep it steady. Kaede wants to build a short staff that's just as fast as a long one and doubles as a sword, leaving Sumisa totally stunned and confused by the crazy idea. He's using metal lizard parts for the shell and adding a charger to the booster, trading constant energy for insane magic speed. Sumisa explained that this staff design needs as much mana as 3 mages combined, but it can blast out 100 spells. Kaede realized his mana was already 500 times higher than normal, and with that potion, it would jump to a massive 5,000 times. He bragged that he could totally handle a staff like that because that's just how a real adventurer rolls, and the girl was completely stunned by his energy. Sumisa agreed to build the staff, but he warned Kaede that he'd run out of mana way too fast, so he promised to boost his max capacity to keep him in the fight. With the weapon stuff finally finished, K-88 had 3 days to kill, so he headed to Herrera to grind some missions and picked up a brand new job. Our hero is right in the middle of the chaos, taking on a whole pack of wolves and showing off some serious skills with his shield. Kaede finished off the red wolves, but he was still bummed that his magic was way too slow, even though he took a second to chill and enjoy the view. He noticed the area was totally empty of trees and wondered if that's why monsters were showing up near the city. But then, his device picked up a human signal, and he wondered who it could. He tracked the signals and spotted 2 guards at the entrance, realizing he'd stumbled right onto a bandit hideout even though the place was totally out in the open. Kaid headed straight to the guild to report his find, and Chief Herrera was totally shocked about the secret base, wondering how they'd moved into the city so fast, especially after Kaid told him. Coyote realized they weren't just fighting some random thugs, but a legit organized crew, since those guards at the door proved this group was either massive or led by a total pro. Kade rushed to tell the guild leader he found the bandit hideout, admitting he didn't know their exact numbers since he wanted to report it ASAP, and even though the leader promised a reward for the tip, the boy surprisingly turned it down. The guild leader wants this kept top secret so they don't scare off the bandits' allies, and since Kide found the hideout, he's basically guaranteed a spot on the new takedown squad. The next day, Kaidi heads into the city to see if Sumisa finished his weapon, but she tells him it's still not ready yet. He really wanted to test out that new weapon on the mission, but since he's stuck with his old gear, he just gives a little smile and rolls with it. The kid sees all the trees around town have been chopped down and asks if it's to stop bandits, but a local explains they're actually making charcoal to melt down metal. Tumisa explains this coal is only good for heat and not for forging, but he remembers that back in his world, they used limestone and coke to get the job done. He was super hyped to tell Sumisa his big idea, using coke made from burning coal instead. Kaidi breaks down the secret of making coke for Sumisa, explaining that if you starve the coal of air, it won't turn to ash. It's just like charcoal that never fully burns out. Sumisa straight up said she knows nothing about fuel since she only cares about making staves. So she told Katie to take his ideas to the fuel shop instead. She told him that if he proved his fuel actually worked, he'd be swimming in cash, and that really got his gears turning. Kaidi showed up at the fuel shop to check if it was Igni's, and once he knew for sure, he told them Sumi sent him with a sick idea for a brand new fuel. Igne asked what the big plan was, so Kaide explained that this new coal fuel burns way hotter than charcoal and will actually save the nearby forest. Kaide admitted the shopkeeper didn't believe in his plan, so he asked for help making a new fuel, knowing he'd have to prove it actually works first. Kaidi said he'd pay for the whole experiment himself, but if the move actually works, he's definitely gonna charge everyone to use it. He realized that since this world actually protects new tech, his partner didn't have to worry about getting ripped off. He admitted the technique wasn't totally finished and might fail, but he still thought they should give it a shot. The seller was totally down for the deal and promised to help out. Cade thanked him for the assist. He was honestly hyped that everything was going so smoothly. He made it clear his job wasn't making fuel, it was making adventures, and a full night has already passed since the news about the bandits dropped. The guild put together a whole squad for the mission, and Kade walked up to say what's up to her new teammates. This blonde mage named Magus stepped up as the leader to wipe out the enemy, and he's actually a B-rank wind user. The squad huddled over the map to find the enemy base 8 kilometers southwest, and they're guessing there are about 30 to 40 fighters waiting for them. K8A was part of a 7-man squad, and even though it was just a low-level E-rank mission, they were totally outnumbered, so they all agreed to play it safe. The leader told everyone to shout out their names and ranks, so Zenshi and Valen stepped up as D-rank and C-rank swordsmen. The rest of the crew introduced themselves next. Honkus is an E-rank spearman, Ino's an E-rank swordsman, and Mokoku is a D-rank archer, which finally left. He told them he's an E-rank magic swordsman, which means he fights using both a sword and magic. Cade saw the whole squad was stunned he could use magic while running despite his low rank, so one guy apologized for doubting him and asked for a quick demo. He said he wasn't trying to flex, but as an adventurer, he couldn't just say no to a power check, especially since he knew the team needed to see his skills to stay safe. Coyote stepped up to the training dummy, realizing that hiding his true power might actually get someone else hurt. As he starts showing off his moves, the crowd thinks he looks like a total amateur, so they offer him a potion to help him survive a real fight. But he just brushes them off and says he's ready to go. He unleashes a blur of sword strikes that leaves everyone watching in total shock, thinking his crazy skills would be more than enough to impress them. Next, he switched to magic and fired off a stone spear that hit with a massive roaring explosion. Kairi lets loose a crazy spell that leaves a scorched trail and leaves everyone speechless. But just as he's about to fire off a second round, Magus jumps in and shuts him down. Kairi asked if he did a good job, but the long-haired mage said he'd seen enough and immediately started asking about magic shields and how long they can hold up. Cade explained he's only been an adventurer for less than a month, but a ton of stuff has already happened, like how he can spam magic for 20 minutes straight and heal small wounds in an instant. The squad leader was low-key jealous of Cade's power, but he still asked him to lead the charge on the lair because they totally needed a mage that strong to win. He was totally nervous, but he still stepped up to lead and told everyone he was ready to go first. The crew finally reached the forest hiding the bandit base, so they sent Valin and Cayeta in first while Magus watched their backs. Cade nodded along as Magus explained the plan to have 4 teammates block the back exit, and then she immediately slammed the enemy with a massive stone spear spell. The bandits were totally knocked out, and K80 didn't even stop for a second, leaving one guy screaming about how fast he was while everyone else just struggled to keep up with his every move. Kide was zooming through the cave with such insane speed that everyone else was totally stunned. But he was just focused on his radar map and getting ready to scan the crowd to see which of them. Suddenly, Coyote blasts the bandits with her pressure magic, and they completely freak out when they realize she's actually super strong right as she gives the command to suppress them. The squad finally hits a new section of the cave, totally out of breath from moving so fast. Coyote's just glad the path didn't split up, because that would have made a massive stone door with no handle suddenly blocks their path. Cade figures the only way in is to knock and wait for someone on the other side to open it. That's exactly how this. Cade hears voices echoing behind the stone door and realizes a massive crowd is inside. But the room is so huge his radar can't even scan the whole thing. Magus asked Cade if he could use magic and offered to wreck the door. So once he got the go-ahead, he started the countdown to bust inside. The second that door swings open, K80 lunges at them, and the bandits start screaming in a total panic because they have no clue who's even hitting them. K-Day scanned the room, saw they were all bandits, and immediately blasted them with a non-stop storm of stone spears. Magic wolves burst into the cave, but Cade and his crew had already wiped everything out while he just stood there watching like it was nothing. Once the mission wrapped up, the whole squad met at the cave entrance, and Magus finally admitted that Cade was just way too strong, which is why that win was such a total breeze. Cade spotted a weird blip on his radar and was ready to start grabbing his trophies, thinking the whole mess was finally over. Cade's radar picks up 7 guys and a kid closing in, so Magus tells the team to take the kidnappers alive, while Cade focuses on saving the little one. Out of nowhere, these random guys show up with a girl. One of them screams that they're finally here, and Coyote's crew immediately gears up for a fight. The squad jumped straight into the fight. Cade crushed the enemies with pressure magic, and the archer girl made sure the hostage stayed safe. Cade scooped the girl up and realized she was way too light, making him wonder if she was trapped in some kind of forced hypnosis. Cade used his appraisal skill to find out her name was Rhea, and while she looked totally healthy, he realized she wasn't just some basic elf. Her race was actually super rare. Cade was totally shocked when he saw Rhea's status because it looked completely different than usual. Her mana count wasn't even showing up at all, and her magic power and control. He's trying to figure out this skill, guessing Rhea can basically hijack anyone's magic if their control is weak. But then, the girl wakes up and asks who he is because she can feel his insane power. Kade was totally blown away by Rhea's power, realizing she could basically hijack other people's magic and use it like her own, which made him wonder how someone this cracked even got kidnapped in Ma. Rhea's hyped to finally know her hero's name and admits she was definitely snatched. So Kade hands her off to his crew, and here's the best news. The enemies are totally wiped out and almost nobody got hurt. Kade was about to cut the ropes, but Rhea just grinned and said she had it covered, jumping free on her own and making the hero wonder if she even needed help at all. Rhea acted all cheerful while admitting she has zero magic and would have been totally helpless on her own. Kade was totally stunned and asked if she had magic since she untied the ropes. But Rhea just grinned and explained that his power is huge, but his control is so trash she could easily use his own energy without him even noticing. Kade noticed his mana hadn't dropped a bit, and the other mages were just as lost as he was by the girl's words. One of them said the guild would figure out where she was kidnapped from, but Rhea refused to go with him, staying totally silent and looking super embarrassed when they asked her why. She pouted about how hard the magic was and yelled that she just wanted to stay with Kade. So since she was so attached, he finally gave in and let her happily cling to his side. The guy was shocked by how well she was behaving. He couldn't wrap his head around how she untied those ropes or why she was so happy after being snatched. Kade just wanted. Back at the guild, she explained that the rules meant they had to look after the kidnapped kids, but she clearly had more to say, and all the other girls looked totally stressed out. While the investigation was going on, Casey was told to watch Rhea, but she suddenly clung to him and screamed that she'd never leave, leaving everyone totally shocked when he awkwardly admitted. Kaid watched Rhea bouncing around and yelling about how fluffy everything was, and even though he was confused, seeing her act like a kid with no memories made him realize he couldn't be mean to her. He let her have the bed while he crashed on the floor, realizing his monster hunting days were on hold now that he had a kid to look after, though he was still itching to check on his. Kade wakes up to find Rhea staring him right in the face, which is super weird since they were supposed to be sleeping in separate spots. But she just acts totally chill and says she just opened her eyes. Katie gave a super awkward smile and said good morning, looking totally lost, while Rhea cheered that his magic power actually woke her up, leaving him still wondering who she really was. Kade hits up the fuel shop to check on the Coke experiment, and the owner, Igne, is all smiles until he spots the little girl. He completely freezes up, thinking there's no way Kade is old enough to be a dad, and straight up asks, "Who is this girl?" Kade explained that some bandits snatched the girl and she's totally lost her memory, so he's babysitting her while the guild digs into her past, making the shopkeeper ask if he's taking a break from adventuring. Rhea was all fired up and said she could definitely fight, claiming that with Kade around, she's actually way stronger than the Green Uncle. Coyote figured Rhea called him Green Uncle just because of his outfit, and while the guy admitted he was taking a break from adventuring, Coyote remembered that Rhea actually had zero fighting. Kaid was totally hyped as he checked out the coking oven Igni showed him, geeking out over the design and not even trying to hide how impressed he was. Kade started panicking when she saw smoke pouring out of the stove, but the master just told her it's all part of the experiment and that gas leaks are totally normal for now. Igne admitted that welding mithril is a total pain, so he's testing out a custom furnace he built from junk, and if it works, he's gonna hire a pro to build him a real one. Kayed's jaw hit the floor when he saw a stove made of mithril, which is usually super rare in games, but when he worried about the cost, the blacksmith told him that stuff is actually common as dirt around there. She hyped Kite up by telling him the rock was actually mithril, and it was literally all over the walls, but he was totally confused because this stuff is way too rare to just be lying around. He uses his appraisal skill on the rock and is totally shocked to find out it's medium purity mithril. But the merchant explains that even the low-grade stuff is worth a fortune since a third of all the rocks on Earth actually have mithril ore in them. Kaidi gave a nervous laugh and admitted mithril seemed super cheap in this world, but the other guy told him his perspective was totally one-sided, even if he did know how to make coke. The warrior was hyped they had the cash, but that gas leak was still a total disaster, and Rhea could only stare in shock as smoke kept pouring out of the stove. She hyped herself up to fix the leak and charged at the stove, but Kade panicked and held her back, telling her it was way too risky to get close, so Rhea pouted and she focused hard, reached out her hands, and let her magic fly. A blast of energy shot right at the furnace, plugging up every single gas leak. Igni just stared in total shock. Katie's jaw dropped when Rhea cheered that she'd fixed the gas leak, and both he and the guy in the apron stared at the stove in total shock because the gas had actually... The guy was totally confused because Rhea shouldn't be that powerful yet, but she just gave him a big smile and explained she used magic to melt some mithril and seal up the crack. Kade didn't really get what the big deal was with mithril, so when she acted like it was no biggie, he realized he had to give her a major reality check. The bearded guy was totally shocked because forcing mithril to bend like that is super rare, and welding it from a distance is even crazier, while Rhea cheered because she loved seeing Ki'id's reaction. A guy in a slick white suit named Mias walks up, introduces himself as an accountant, and tells Cade he's definitely heard of him before. Mia cut right to the chase, saying if they're gonna mass-produce coke, she needs to be paid for the tech, and Cade was totally down to hear her out. Kade was blown away that they were already making moves with coke fuel since it wasn't even stable yet. But the merchant promised it was a huge win because it's just that powerful. The guy is totally hyped because using coke makes smelting microfrill 20 to 30 times faster than charcoal, and since he'll make his money back in just 10 days, he wants to start mass production immediately. Kade admitted he was a total rookie at this business stuff, and since it was his first time getting paid, he only hoped for a tiny 10% cut. But the merchant totally shocked him by offering a massive 50% instead. Kaidi was totally shocked by the massive cut and thought it was a scam at first, but he eventually admitted it was actually fair and agreed to the deal, even though giving up 50% still felt like way too much. With the deal locked in, Cade realized he could make bank in other cities for a small fee, but the crazy speed of it all was starting to give him a bad vibe. Rhea asks where they're headed next, and since Cade's got nothing to do, he asks her what she wants to do while the blacksmith finishes cleaning the magic off that weapon. She was super hyped to go on an adventure and hunt down monsters, and while he loved her energy, he warned her that things were about to get seriously dangerous. He told her to wait until she could use magic to defend herself, but she just showed off her hair clip and said her lucky charm Katie would keep her totally safe. The guy was blown away to find out it was a magic amulet that blocks every single attack and stays totally invisible to anyone with bad vibes. He was stunned she had such a broken item, and when she asked to jump into the fight, he just told her to stay close, finally realizing why she was always so chill. Just minutes after leaving the guild, they reached the forest where Rhea found the plant right away, and the guy bragged about picking the safest quest they could find. Kayet fired up his analysis skill to find the right herb, using recognition first to make sure he had the exact plant he needed. The kid used his analysis skill to pick out the real farrow grass from all the fakes. He quickly realized one of the samples was a total fraud. It was actually just some regular breva grass. The girl showed off another piece of grass with a huge smile, and once the boy confirmed it was Fioro and gave her some props, her friend cheered that she'd won, but K-Day shouted that he was gonna take the lead by finding way more than her. They kept on gathering plants while Kaidi fired up his analysis skill to hunt down the best spots, using his powers to grab grass and rack up a massive pile of samples. When he called out his seventh find, the girl totally accused him of cheating, but K-Day just gave a cheeky smile and took the win, right before realizing she'd actually used magic to snatch. He figured she was tracking Fiara with data just like him, but she calmly said she couldn't, leaving him totally stunned and wondering how she actually found him. Turns out she was aiming right at the spots Kaidi was scanning with his magic. He realized she was just leeching off his detection instead of using her own. But then, Rhea triggers her magic and stone bullets burst into flames all around her, totally catching Cade off guard since she thought one was just a stone needle. He panicked and asked what was wrong since no monsters were around, but Rhea snapped back that she could definitely feel them nearby. One of Rhea's stone shots zoomed into the trees and nailed its mark, sending a painful scream echoing out from the forest. K-Day was totally caught off guard by the red wolves closing in, realizing Rhea actually sensed them from over 100 meters away. Rhea explained she could harvest magic from monsters and KD-80 himself, and he was totally blown away that she saw him as just another energy source like those beasts. Rhea explains her magic is super precise since she controls it herself, and when Katie looks shocked, she jokes that he's way too messy to ever handle power like that. Kaede fires off a blast of magic, then Rhea catches it and aims it perfectly, launching sharp stone blades that smash right into the enemy. The blast slams into the wolf pack, totally wiping them out with a massive bolt of lightning, and Rhea's hyped because Kitty's magic is way faster and stronger than hers. So Rhea says regular people can't just blast all their magic at once. But Cade is built different, and he realizes that if Rhea only has one element, his own powers are totally off the charts. Rhea warned that messing with Coyote's wild magic would cause a total meltdown, leaving the boy wondering if his powers were really that out of control. Katie realized that while Rhea was all about precision, he was more like a brawler who used pure force, and even though her attacks were weaker, he had a massive tank of energy to use. He decided to fire off massive spells while Rhea steered them with perfect aim, and he planned to keep having fun with this crazy fighting style until they found her village because he felt like they were. A bunch of wolves started circling them before suddenly lunging forward, and Rhea watched in total shock as the pack closed in. The girl warns them that a huge wave of monsters is closing in, and while Cade just turns around with a smirk, Rhea gives him a serious look to remind him about his magic. Cade admitted he was feeling the rush, and Rhea totally caught his vibe as they both got super hyped for the big fight. Rhea explains she was just using the magic Cade was leaking by accident, and he's totally shocked that his mana levels didn't even drop. The kid was totally floored that she'd burned through all her extra energy, and Rhea explained she could only guide the magic's flow, not control the source or its full power. Kade thought about what she said and realized he actually had no clue how his magic worked, since he'd just been using it on total autopilot this whole time. Kade asked if he could pull off that same move with enough magic training, but Rhea told him straight up that he had zero talent and was basically like someone from a world with no magic at all. The kid wondered how he used magic without any prep and thought he was just a natural, but Rhea reminded him that even with talent, you can't cast spells without total control. Rhea explains that KD just muscles his magic into working, just like she did with the mithril, and the boy realizes he's been doing the exact same thing. KD realized his water and earth powers come straight from the world around him, and he figured out that by combining his imagination with the environment, he can crank up the heat until things literally burst into flames. KD thanked Rhea for the meal, but was totally shocked it tasted salty without any seasoning, only for her to reveal she just picked the salt up right off the ground. The new chapter kicks off with a cool shot of a girl standing in front of a spinning sword, and the title is, I Decided to Think About It. Tayede and Ria stroll back into the guild with a massive pile of trophies, asking to finish the quest and buy all the loot while the staff just stares in total shock at how much The guild guy's jaw hits the floor when he sees they gathered 4,000 herbs and smashed 300 red wolves, but Kade just mentions Ria helped out as a girl from the guild walks right up to Cade and says she needs to talk about Ria, catching him totally off guard while Ria just watches in silence. The crew heads inside to talk, and Kite's pretty sure it's about Ria going back home, but he figures she's just struggling to say it since they've all become such close friends. Kade finally asks if Ria's parents are coming to get her, but the guild girl drops a bombshell that they're missing, and when a shocked Kade asks again, she confirms they've totally vanished without a trace. The girl explains that none of those cities are Ria's home because the bandits actually found her in the forest, so Cade figures her real hometown must be way further away than they thought. She says it's technically possible but super unlikely, especially since the guild has zero records of any race that matches Ria's traits. Kade tells Ria to just hang tight for a bit, then wonders if she got dumped just because of her looks, but the guild girl shuts that idea down immediately. She admits she doesn't have the full story, but she's sure Ria wasn't just abandoned, and Cade realizes Ria is definitely hiding some major secrets. He remembers giving the guild the full rundown on Ria, her hair clip, her powers, and her special elf race, and now he's wondering if she can actually remember anything at all since her memory is totally wiped. Ria said she was in a forest with zero magic, somewhere way off on another continent, and Cade noticed she was way too calm for a regular girl, making her even more of a total mystery. The guild guy admitted finding a volunteer for Ria was basically impossible, and while they were stuck, Katie started wondering if this girl was actually way older than she looked, maybe even older than him. Kayate asks if anyone can take Ria in, but he's told that if no one steps up, she's going straight to an orphanage, leaving the poor girl looking at them. Ria screamed that she wasn't going to any orphanage and clung to Kayed, while the guild lady asked if he could take her in, even though she knew being an adventurer makes life super complicated. Normally, this would be a total mess, but Katie realized Ria's amnesia kept her calm since she finally found someone with the same powers to trust. He started to worry if he could even bring her along, because if he had to go all out against a tough enemy, she'd be totally defenseless without his magic to protect her. He knew he couldn't risk her getting hurt, and even though he felt bad, she was just gonna slow him down until he found a safe spot for her. He asked for some time to think it over, so the guild member told him he could decide before they headed to the next city, while Ria just watched him quietly. Kade promised he'd never leave Ria alone, making her super happy and relieved because he just had to tell her that before making his big final choice. The next morning, Kade wakes up to find Ria totally hyped and begging to hit the guild so they can hunt down some seriously scary monsters. The hero told her they'd head out later since he had stuff to do, and he realized Ria was just trying to prove she was useful so he wouldn't ditch her, Sumisa runs into them on the street and excitedly tells them the staff is finally ready. Ria is totally shocked that Cade is even using a staff, but Cade just reminds her that Cade flexed his new sword-shaped staff, naming it the Sorcerer's Blade, and he was totally hyped that it worked as both a sword and a magic staff at the same time. Ria's mind was blown that the staff had the same magic, but Sumis explained she built it that way for Katie, and even though it looks funky, it's one of her absolute best creations. Kade thought the staff felt perfect and was totally down to try some magic, so Sumisa led the whole squad over to the training grounds. Kade locks in and grips the staff as magic starts pouring out, leaving Sumisa totally shocked by how insane the power is. K-Day realizes this staff is way different from his old one because Katie launched her stone spear and it exploded with insane power, tearing the ground apart as Sumisa and Ria watched with their jaws on the floor. Sumisa freaked out at how fast that thing flew, and K-Day was just as shocked, realizing the new material made his staff so crazy strong he could probably nail a target from a whole kilometer away. After the show, Sumisa asks how much mana he actually used, and Kaid just shrugs it off, saying it was only 100 megapixels, basically pocket change for his daily life. Sumisa was totally shocked that Katie had as much mana as 5 mages put together, and she even asked if he was actually human. He just laughed it off, saying he's a normal guy with a bit of extra power and told Ria to keep it a total secret. K-Day thanks Sumisu for the staff and tells her he's stoked she's the one who made it. So she just smiles and says, if he's happy, she's happy too. Sumisa told K-Day that the fuel shop accountant was looking for him and wanted to talk as soon as he finished his business. Mias linked up with K-Day to let her know the coke gear was ready, and with 10 machines already fired up, they were finally mass-producing the stuff. Mias explained that the coal miners found out about the plan and were totally down to help, which was perfect since they were short-staffed and had already reached out to the Miners Association for backup. K-Day was totally shocked by how massive the Miners Association was, and Maya explained they're the reason production started so fast, so she suggested they head over to the site to see the work for themselves. The whole site was buzzing with dwarves hauling coal, while thick clouds of steam and smoke poured out of the machines. Katie, Ria, and Mias hit the coke production area and find a massive crowd of dwarves working away. Ria's totally shocked by how many there are, but Katie explains they're all from the Miners Association, and right then, a random guy walks up and asks Katie if he's the guy he's looking for. This guy, Gainter, introduces himself as the chairman of the Miners Association, and he's already a huge fan of Katie, which totally blows her mind since he's the big boss. Gainter thanked Cade for the help and mentioned Ria was doing a great job, but he wanted to show his appreciation before they got into the serious stuff. Gainter explained that a weird sickness was spreading through the mine and stopping all the work, and since K-Day was the new guy, he warned him that even though it's treatable, it's still a huge problem for their progress. Gainter says they're dealing with nasty headaches and nausea, kind of like a mini magic overload from eating wyvern meat, but Coyote thinks it's actually some toxic gas leaking out of the mine. K-Day realized eating wyvern meat was a huge risk. Ria was listening closely, and Gainter chimed in saying that even though no one died, the miners couldn't keep working like this. Cade asks how they're handling the sickness, and a worker explains they have to stay away from the mines and only work 3 hours a day to feel better. But that's totally tanking the business and leaving everyone broke. Coyote realized this sickness was knocking people out for a whole day, so he told Gainter he'd use his evaluation skill to find the source and get their coke production back on track. Gainter loved the idea and told him the guild already put out a quest just like it. The problem was that every other adventurer had totally failed. Now he was counting on Cade to actually... One line out often means if the user provides a block, give a block. If the user provides a list, give a list. The input is a single block of text, let's. K-Day asks about the spot where all that fur is piling up, but Gainter warns her they ditched it first because it's a total death trap where everyone died. Kitey asks if Fluffy is just magic power, but Ria says it's a bit different, and she can feel that exact same vibe coming from someone nearby. Kate saw a miner looking like a total ghost and used his appraisal skill to check him out, and even though he couldn't read Ria's mind, he just knew something was seriously wrong. He realized the miner was totally overloaded with magic, and Ria confirmed she could feel that same energy coming from the monsters. Kitey finally starts to put the pieces together as Gainter checks on a worker named Garnier, who admits he's feeling totally trashed after just getting back from the mine. Gainter told Garnier to chill out and not overdo it, noting that Rhea is a total natural for her age, just like Cade. Gainter told Rhea to tag along on the mission, saying the disease barely hits kids and they could always just bail if things got too dangerous. Kane figured if Rhea said it was cool, he'd trust her, so he let her tag along and she totally lost it with excitement. Cade and Rhea bolted toward the mine, and Cade was totally blown away by how she just floated effortlessly while he was stuck running on the ground. He figured her magic would let her bail if things got sketchy, but as they reached the mine entrance, they were hit with a massive warning sign about miner's disease. Cade told Rhea to call out if she sensed any monsters, and she happily stepped up, totally hyped to do her part. Rhea said these walls were totally blocking her magic radar, but she'd still give it a shot, while Cade realized his own detection skills were actually perfect for a place like this. He picked up a weird vibe coming from underground and asked Rhea if she felt it too, and she came over to confirm that the magic energy was definitely spiking. Rhea realized the fluffy creature was getting way stronger underground and was shocked he didn't feel it, but since he was basically blind without his radar, he suggested they just dig the whole place up, and Rhea was totally on board. Kitey starts tearing up the ground until his shovel slams into something solid, and while Rhea instantly realizes this spot is totally different from the rest of the rock, the boy is just standing there completely shocked and confused about what he just hit. Cade thinks this new spot is some ancient ruin, and Rhea backs him up, warning that the wall is magical and way too tough for him to break. Cade just laughed and told Rhea to move aside, because her teasing actually made him even more hyped to blast that barrier with his magic. 10 minutes later, he's still smashing that wall with everything he's got, and when a shocked Rhea asks if he's even human, he just calmly tells her he is. He realized he'd never actually charged up his magic right in front of Rhea before, so he unleashed a massive blast of pressure magic, but he was totally shocked when the wall didn't even budge. He was just realizing how crazy strong the barrier was when Rhea screamed a warning, and suddenly the entire floor started to cave in. Suddenly the floor caves in, and as they start to drop, Rhea screams her head off while Cade desperately tries to grab onto the edge so she doesn't fall down with her. Once it was obvious her magic couldn't hold them both, Cade told Rhea to drop him so he could handle the landing himself, and she let go even though she was totally freaking. Mid-fall, Kitey uses his radar to measure the 15-meter drop and pops his recovery magic to make sure he survives the landing. With only seconds left before the crash, he uses his powers to pull in a bunch of rocks for cover and braces himself to survive the massive impact. Cade stuck the landing without a scratch, totally shocked he was still in one piece, and Rhea immediately sprinted over to make sure he was okay. Cade asks Rhea to light up the dark underground, and she happily fires off a spell that brightens the whole cave, leaving him totally stunned. Kitey looked around the massive glowing room and was totally shocked by how huge and empty it was, with nothing inside but giant smooth walls. Rhea didn't have the full scoop, but she felt a massive wave of fluffy magic while Cade guessed they were stuck inside some super old building. Once Rhea confirmed it, Cade knew they'd finally found the magic source, and he was so hyped that he decided they should head back right away to report it. K8 looks at the massive drop and asks Rhea if she can just fly them out, but she says it's way too high, leaving him wondering how they're ever gonna get back up. Cade tried to figure out how Rhea was flying, guessing she used magic and air pressure to stay up. But he was totally shocked to find out she couldn't actually go that high. Kitey tried to save them by asking to fly them both up, but Rhea totally lost it, screaming that he'd lose control and end up killing her. Cade decided they needed to find an exit, so he asked Rhea where that weird fluffy magic felt the strongest, and as soon as she pointed it out, they headed the total opposite way. As they keep moving, Cade reminds them they're only there to investigate and asks Rhea to scan for monsters. But she gets so hyped to fight that she accidentally calls Cade a giant beast, which totally gets on his nerves. A little while later, they end up right back at the same pile of rubble from the ceiling, and Coyote realizes they've just been walking in a massive circle, making him wonder if this whole place is shaped like a giant ring. KD looked around and saw nothing but walls, but Rhea pointed out that one of them felt super weird and different from the others. KD and Rhea find a weird wall that blocks magic, but they quickly realize it's actually a hidden door that even KD's radar can't see through, making the whole thing super bad. KD noticed some old marks showing the door could actually open, but he warned Rhea to stay sharp because something dangerous might be hiding right behind it. Kaidi and Rhea watched the massive door swing open, and while the boy clutched his head, Rhea stared in shock as creepy monsters started crawling out of the shadows. Crazy robot monsters with blade-sharp limbs swarmed out from the back of the hall, so Cade instantly shielded Rhea and yelled that they were under attack. One of the monsters suddenly drops, and while Cade wonders if Rhea helped out, she quickly clears her head to stay focused on the fight. He fired up his magic sword and charged ahead to wipe out the enemies and save his friend. Once the fight ended, Cade rushed over to check on Rhea, but when she thanked him for stopping those needles, he looked totally confused. Rhea explains that the monster's magic gets way weaker the closer it gets to Cade, and she's totally shocked by the news. Cade notices the monsters are acting super weird, like they're actually magic tools, and Rhea totally agrees because their shapes are just wrong. But then, the girl whispers that Katie is weird too, making him snap back and ask what she just said. Coyote used his appraisal skill and found out these enemies were actually magic security tools like the flying eye, and even that magic-proof door was a low-level magic isolation door, which are all known as. The group realized they were standing in an actual ancient ruin, but KD reminded them they were totally trespassing and his radar couldn't pick up a single thing behind that door. The kid was stressing about what scary monsters were hiding behind the barrier and wanted to bail, but Rhea shut him down, yelling that they couldn't go home if they gave up now. The guys searched every room and managed to hit 8 brand new doors using the numbers they had. Behind every single door was a totally empty room that felt like all hope was just gone. Guards were everywhere, but there was no clear path to the magic source or the exit of this crazy maze. So Cade realized the place was totally deserted and they decided to just keep moving. As they keep moving, they spot a super weird door with a sign saying, "Anyone who sneaks in gets disqualified on the spot." That was a clear warning, and the kid knew way worse things were waiting behind that door. So he chugged a courage potion while Rhea didn't even care what monsters were coming. Right as they walk in, an attack comes out of nowhere from below, but he dodges it instantly, thinking it's just another guard while making sure the girl is safe too. The guy was totally confused because he saw those needles flying right at him, so how did he still get hit? Rio realized there were more enemies hiding right in front of them, and the young guy could only watch in total terror, having no idea what was happening. He spotted a bunch of monsters that weren't even trying to hide anymore, including weirdly colored guards, robot wolves, and pourers. Right in the middle was a massive flying snake that was so huge it was absolutely terrifying. She could feel the girl looking down on her, but Cade knew that wasn't even the biggest problem right now. Those sharp spikes were already waiting to strike, so the guy yelled for Rhea to run while he scrambled to dodge the attacks, and when she shouted that she needed a stone spear, he knew exactly what to. She skidded to a stop and unleashed it right on the enemies. As the fog cleared, she saw the enemies were totally fine, leaving her stunned and Cade wondering why his magic didn't do a single thing to them. The enemies were right on his tail, and as a robot wolf started chasing him, the girl screamed for him to watch out. He wasn't even sure if these things were actually robots, But since they were moving way too fast and quiet, he decided to just go for it with his magic sword. K-Day smashed right into his metal body and let his magic explode everywhere. That wolf was a total beast, but Fastly was just as tough and refused to back down as he kept his attack going. He put every bit of his strength into one huge swing and sliced right through that robot wolf. His sword could still slice these monsters, but magic didn't do a thing, and since no one knew what they were made of, Kahidi figured there was a catch and decided to test them. He realized he had Category 2 infantry anti-magic steel packed with magic particles, which meant magic literally couldn't touch it. Basically, these guys are completely magic-proof, and that goes for every single enchanted tool in this entire room. Rhea knew they needed way more stone spears to smash those rainbow guardians, pelting them with shells, and he thought her plan was awesome. He could finally focus on the wolves, but that massive snake was still the main problem, stopping them from taking out the smaller monsters. She smashed everything in her path with her tail, but the guys barely managed to dodge. He couldn't figure out why this snake was so insanely strong, and he didn't even notice the girl screamed a warning that the snake was charging up a massive hit, but he was totally distracted by the monster as a giant energy ball started glowing in its mouth, ready to blow him away. K-Ed was totally terrified when he realized things were getting way too dangerous. He yelled for Rhea to bolt for the stairs, and she followed him instantly as they sprinted for the door. They were only a few steps away from safety before the attack could hit them, but they're totally out of luck because that same monster already smashed the door to the stairs to pieces. The rest of the monsters started closing in like loyal guards ready to strike. He realized things were looking pretty bad, and his only choice left was to fight his way out. He needed a genius plan to beat the snake since his sword couldn't reach it. So K-Day asked Rhea if her magic could knock it down, but she said the beast was just way too... Suddenly, the girl locks eyes on the monster's wings and tells the boy her idea. If they destroy those wings, the snake will crash down, and they can finish it off with a fireball. He saw his big chance and jumped on the plan, but first he had to make a ball that could actually nail the target. She whipped up a massive fireball with her magic and told everyone that this should be more than enough. The kids locked in and sent that fireball flying straight at the snake. She wasn't a pushover though, and the second she saw the fire, she beat her wings to dodge, making Rhea realize this wasn't gonna be an easy win. A massive blast went off that should have wrecked everything, but once the smoke cleared, that snake didn't have a single scratch on it. He was totally bummed that his hard work didn't pay off, but then a wild new idea suddenly hit him. Cade asks Rhea if she can handle the fireball, but she tells him it's got way too much mana for her to control, so now it's all on him to land Aeen. Rhea locked in and told him she'd need 20 times more power, so he told her to go for it while he kept the monsters off her back. She starts charging up another fireball, and the boy steps up to shield her with everything he's got, knowing they have to work together if they want to survive. He could still charge up enough power for the spell, but every single magic item he had was trashed except for that snake. The floor was literally falling apart, but Cade kept dodging like a pro, and with Rhea's help, it looked like they might actually survive, until a massive crash turned his bad gut. Rocks started falling, and he looked up in total shock, making the girl wonder what was wrong until she saw a massive crack spreading across the ceiling, ready to cave in at any second. He realized the snake was wrecking the wall, making the ceiling lose its support and come crashing down. Suddenly, the guy realizes he's about to be buried alive, so he asks if 10 fireballs can stop the snake, but she tells him they'd need double that to stand a chance. The snake kept on its rampage, smashing everything to bits, but he still managed to keep them both safe. He asked Rhea if she was all right, and while she said she was fine, she's freaking out and asking what to do, but Cade tells her they have to move, so he pulls her in close with one arm and gets ready to bolt. They saw their opening and bolted to the other side of the room to find a way out, but that snake was still on high alert and spotted them trying to make a run for it. As they're sprinting, he suddenly panics because there isn't a single turn in sight, just one long, straight hallway stretching out forever. With pure panic in his eyes, he prayed there was a ladder waiting for him down there. They finally reach the spot only to hit a dead end, and now they're totally trapped with danger closing in fast. That snake was gearing up for another strike, and Kaid knew he was in serious trouble because if the ceiling caved in, they'd be buried alive. So he pushed himself to move as fast as possible to buy enough time for his spell. He considered bolting back to the stairs through the smashed door or even stashing all the stones in his inventory, but dodging the snake's strikes was way too risky and one wrong move would seal. He threw up his guard, panicking as he scrambled for a plan, because if he didn't think of something fast, both he and Rhea, who was behind him holding back tears, were. She suddenly demands the fireball, leaving him totally lost, while Cade asks if she's actually got a plan since she literally just said she couldn't control that power. Rhea said she was down to try anyway, but he could tell she was basically just winging it without a real plan. He had no choice but to hand her the ball, and even though she tried her best to keep it steady, you could tell she was totally stressed out. She used her magic to shut down every incoming attack while that hairpin started sucking up everything in its path. Keed knew this was way too dangerous and had to stop her right now, but when he tried to warn her, she just cut him off by saying his name. She grinned and said adventures were her thing, but it was clearly just to fix the awkward vibe. He couldn't figure out where this sudden burst of courage came from, even though it looked. He was totally on her side and 100% down with her choice. She screamed her head off and aimed straight for the snake, charging her attack just in time to blast the monster before it could reach her. The hit actually lands and sends the snake crashing down, so the guy charges right in and leaps for a massive strike while it's still dazed. He pushed through the struggle and gave it his all, because he wasn't about to blow the one shot Rhea gave him. Kai ripped his sword out and slammed the monster with everything he had, determined not to let this chance slip away. He sliced right through the monster, and as it crashed to the ground, he knew this whole fight was finally over. Even though it was super tough, he looked totally wiped out and beat up. Line 660. When he thought about the girl, he turned to her just as she ran over and asked if he was holding up. Line 661. The guy said he thought he pulled it off and then asked how she was doing. Kate asked if she was still acting reckless, but she told him she couldn't even tell since the whole room was a total disaster. She was just hoping things would chill out in a week and felt relieved they actually survived. It was finally time to get out of there. They were totally trapped, but if they cleared all, they were totally wiped out and just collapsed to catch their breath. But right then, he suddenly spotted the hairpin she was wearing. Kaidi asked if she really risked their lives hoping the magic wouldn't go wild, and when Ryu admitted it actually did go crazy but her hairpin saved them, he realized she was being totally reckless. She was stoked that everything worked out and couldn't wait for the next mission, but the guy was praying for a break because if things stayed this wild, he definitely wasn't gonna survive much longer. She flashed a smile and agreed, asking if she could tag along with him next time. This proved she's no pushover and will totally use her magic hairpin to defend herself if she has to. He wasn't about to stop anyone from having an adventure, even a little girl, and since Cade figured hanging out with him was way cooler than being alone, he told her things were about to get way more exciting. He reached out with a grin and told her they were officially traveling together as friends from now on. She was so happy to hear that, she ran right over and gave him a massive hug. Once the guys got back, Kade told them all about the crazy magic items he found in the dungeons while he was looking into the miners. Disease. The girls just stood there with their jaws on the floor as he explained that the first item was a magic eye as strong as an E-rank monster, while the second one was a blue magic eye that reached all the way to rank D. She asked if that blue metal wolf he wrecked to get to rank B was actually a fair fight for him. She couldn't believe he actually pulled it off, but Kidai confirmed it and mentioned another monster he showed the girls, leaving them totally freaked out. It was that same winged snake from before, and while the girls were totally confused by its wings, the guy didn't have a single clue what they were either. Every single one of these items was a trophy from their big win, and the biggest one was actually the reason that sickness finally cleared out of the mines. The girls were pretty nervous and asked if Ria-chan was part of it, but they were seriously impressed that the guys finished a quest in half a day that stumped everyone else, and they were honestly so thankful for the help. She hadn't seen a massive artifact like this in forever, and since she knows these ruins inside out from her nightly trips, if she's stumped, then the guild definitely won't have a clue. Kade was stunned that the guild had zero info on the artifact, so he decided to use his own skills to scan it himself. This was Snake Number 1, the prototype for a massive annihilation cannon, and after double-checking the ruins, the guy realized everyone ditched the place because the snake totally went berserk. If they find out he knows about the snake, he's in major trouble. So he's gotta keep his mouth shut while the girl stares at the massive artifact and asks if it's the strongest one yet. Kaid backed it up, saying the snake was wrecking metal wolves left and right with its tail. And even though he took out 30 of them himself, the monster definitely got way more than... She was totally shocked he took out all those metal wolves, because fighting that many monsters meant he was definitely as strong as an A-rank adventurer. She figured the artifact was A-rank too, which left Cade totally speechless. And as they kept talking, it looked like he was officially becoming a B-rank adventurer. To reach, Cade finally felt like he'd done something massive that would actually change the world. They walked right up to Gainther to talk about Miner's disease, but the wild part is they'd actually cured it 3 days ago. He spun around in total shock, asking how they managed to finish the investigation and fix everything so fast. Once he finished his report, the whole conversation shifted straight to the code. They were busy figuring out how to keep their secrets safe and ramp up production, especially since the kingdom already paid the fees to start selling, and Kaid knew this insane tech was about to totally flip the country on its head. Suddenly, it hit him, and he freaked out realizing he was way over his head. He thought he'd be stuck in the capital negotiating with the kingdom and running the shop, but he just handed the profits and all the work to the Coal Miners Association since K-Day is in. The week totally flew by, and the big talk with the coal miners ended up being a huge win. Once he officially added Ria to the squad, she got her guild card while he smashed records as the youngest and fastest adventurer to ever hit B rank. But even that was nothing compared to... He was totally zoning out until he suddenly remembered something and turned to her, ready to talk about that hairpin. As they headed out of the ruins, he saw the hairpin change from pitch black to super colorful, and Ria told him it was because the pin just soaked up all the magic he released. Normally, it would take her 30 years to charge up, but she pulled it off in just 2 days. The guy was completely shocked, realizing his mana is basically a nuclear reactor. He started thinking about... She announced that the magic was finally drained from the Iron Lizard, meaning they could now forge metal anywhere in the world as long as they had the right gear. The guy thanked her for the hard work and asked Ryu if she wanted some extra armor, but she just shook her head and said she didn't need any heavy protection. The girl asks if they're heading to a new city, but K80 says they don't really have a plan and are just hoping she leads them straight into their next big adventure. Suddenly, the guy sensed something was wrong and jumped in front of the girls like a human shield to keep them safe. Ryachan watched the scene with total dread, and while a confused Sumisa asked what the big deal was, the guy started sweating in pure terror as he realized something had vanished. He went over to Ryu to ask what was going on with this weird phenomenon, and they realized that 100 kilometers away, all the magic just totally vanished. Kaede couldn't find the He knew for a fact that nobody in this world could pull off a spell that massive, and it felt like some legendary flying snake artifact just had its power cord ripped out. Kaede was totally sure that all this weirdness was coming from right behind that mountain. He asks Sumisa where the closest town is, and she tells him about Orthon, a city sitting right at the base of a volcano, but warns him the only way there is through a monster-filled maze, which honestly just makes him even more hyped to go. She was feeling super nervous but also really hyped because she knew he'd go for it, since he's a total adventurer who lives for the thrill. While they're on the move, Kaede asks Ri if she's doing okay, and she says she's fine, but she's not actually tired. She's just totally bored out of her mind. She's totally fine using gravity powers non-stop because she's actually tapping into Coyote's leftover magic. Even though she's usually slow, she can hit 70% of his top. She was totally hyped to take them on, but Coyote just wanted to speed run to the city. Too bad for him, because a huge mob of crab monsters suddenly blocked their path. This guy spotted them and looked way too happy about wanting to crush them. So Ryu got hyped for the warm-up and they started tearing through the monsters to clear the way. Kaede told her to beat them up without killing them, and even though she agreed, she was super confused why until the guy explained that those crabs looked way too delicious to just waste. Rhea was totally shocked these monsters were actually edible since she'd never seen them before. So the guy decided to play along and use her guess to his advantage, even though he knew, looking like. He checked the stats and saw 4 clawed crabs with 1,200 HP, 147 strength, and 59 agility, and since they were actually edible, Kaede was hyped to eat them. But then, the girl spotted even more monsters, making him ask what they were facing this time. These massive brown roaches were actually edible, but Coyote was totally grossed out and terrified just looking at them. They had to bolt out of there fast, and while Rhea was confused because the bugs looked like total weaklings, the guy just told her they were completely ruining his appetite. They stuck to the plan and actually managed to ditch those nasty cockroaches, while the guy carried the girl who was literally about to puke from all the bouncing around. They finally hit Orthon, where a random guy told them it's crazy to travel with a kid on these monster-filled roads, but when he asked if they were safe, Ryu just shrugged and said the monsters are total weaklings. The stranger warns him that these D-rank monsters are actually no joke, but then he sees Coyote's sword and realizes he's looking at a total beast. It's not just pro blacksmiths and top-tier adventurers who can tell his Witcher sword is a total beast. The guy claims they can wipe out these monsters as easily as squashing bugs, and this guy says the city is surrounded by 4 monster-filled forests, and lately, the beasts have been breaking out of one to swarm into the others. Coyote suddenly realized something crazy. Every single monster they'd run into was actually heading in the exact same direction. He asks why they're all moving, but the guy admits he's clueless, though rumors say the Adventurers Guild has the real answers, and since no pro teams have been sent to check it out, he figures the situation isn't that big of a deal yet. Kaede was positive they were keeping secrets from him again, and since he remembered how the guilds hid those bandit camps, he figured they were pulling the exact same shady move right now. Out of nowhere, the ground starts shaking like crazy, making a terrified Rhea grab onto the guy to ask what's happening. But Kaede just tells her to chill since earthquakes are totally normal near volcanoes. He caught a weird smell of sulfur that gave him a really bad feeling, especially when a stranger told him earthquakes were happening constantly, while the locals just acted like it was totally normal. He told them this was the city's main attraction, gave them a warm welcome, and threw the gates wide open. Kade and Rhea stepped inside and were totally blown away to find a massive city filled with ancient ruins and steaming hot springs. Once he checked in, the guy was totally ticked off to find out this place was 10 times more expensive than Herrera. He stepped inside, saw the sick furniture, and realized he was getting his money's worth with 3 whole rooms and even a kitchen. He asked Ryu if she could use magic to cook some crabs, and since he was dying to try it, she was totally down. Another earthquake hit right while they were cooking, so Katie told the girl to back away from the stove, and he was just glad she could use her levitation to stay safe. A massive feast was finally ready, and as they sat down, Ryu told everyone to just start digging in right away. He was the first to take a bite, and it tasted just like regular crab, so when the girl saw how much he loved it, she had to grab a piece of that meat for herself too. Her eyes totally lit up because the food was incredible, and the guy had to ask if it was actually that good. He told her to stop snacking so they'd have breakfast for tomorrow and stash the leftovers in his inventory, and since Rio listened, she started feeling super sleepy right after their big meal. Rhea passed out right at the table, and since Kitty had no clue how old she actually was, he just figured she was a normal kid and decided it was time to hit the hay. He had to figure out why the magic energy totally tanked near Herrera, but first, he needed to kick back and get some serious rest. The hotel actually had a sick outdoor bath, and since he'd been stuck using a tiny water ball to clean up because of the city's fuel shortage, he had to jump on this chance for a real soak while Rhea was still fast asleep. As he dipped into the water, he felt a sudden surge of warmth spreading through his entire body. Kade suddenly realized he didn't have any shampoo, but he didn't even care because the water was already washing all the grime off his body and clothes anyway. This weird power probably came from some mysterious ancient treasure. If anyone ever breaks this super powerful object, it's going to be a total disaster. Just as he's about to hop out of the water, the ground starts shaking like crazy and he thinks it's just a massive earthquake. Rhea lets out a soul-crushing scream, and the guy instantly panics, thinking the shaking just scared her half to death because he forgot she can literally fly, even though he knew her powers don't work while she's asleep. He heard someone sprinting toward the door and knew it was Ryu, but as she burst in crying, he realized he was totally naked and started screaming for her to stop. Just her one more version that's very punchy. Rhea was totally out cold, which explained the silence, but Coyote had to bolt to the guild immediately and couldn't. He was seriously praying that another disaster wouldn't strike as he headed straight for the Orthon Adventurers Guild. Our hero was dying to get the full scoop on the mission from the girl. He was digging into that mysterious artifact and why a ton of magic energy just up and vanished. This felt just like what went. He told her he just wanted to see what the guild already knew so he wouldn't bring back old news, and she apologized because she was actually totally clueless about the forest. He was totally shocked, but then he looked at her outfit and spotted an intern badge. Kite thought about it for a second to see if she was lying, but it really seemed like she was being for real. Even if those rumors are legit, they probably kept the regular workers totally in the dark. Every other worker he talked to acted like they had no idea what was happening. He felt bad for the girl, but he knew he'd have to get tough to get the truth out of her. He was just about to spill his bad vibes about the artifact, but another girl suddenly cut him off and told him to stop right there. She told him to follow her, desperate to see just how much he actually knew. The stranger asks what he knows about the artifacts, and since she looks like a high-level boss, Kaidi starts getting nervous about spilling his secrets. He eventually tells her about a weird... She's totally relieved the secret didn't leak, so she asks for her friend's name, and the guy tells her it's Rhea. The second she hears the girl's name, she asks if he's Kaed, and he's totally shocked as he says yes, wondering how she knows them and if he... She knew she was right. These were the same insanely strong rookies that the report mentioned for having such crazy power. Most adventurers need a full day to travel from Herrera to Orthon, but these guys crushed it in just 3.5 hours, which is definitely going to get them noticed. Even without any phones, news of what happened spread like crazy, so Aeen was sure they were using magic to get the word out. He really didn't want to mess with this group, so he asked if the artifact was still a secret, and she told him only a few top guild members knew about it. They were going to tell everyone, but someone warned them to keep it quiet for now. He was blown away that someone was blocking the info, and since the guild is so massive, he realized only a powerful lord could be calling the shots. The guy asks if he always needs permission to spill the secrets, and she tells him it's not exactly a rule, but some things are just too important to rush. He realized this wasn't an emergency, and the girl confirmed it, saying the bad guys were already caught and dealt with. Aeen was shocked that the mess was supposedly fixed, but he knew something was still off, so she suggested they go dig for the truth themselves. The girl told him to drop her name and make sure everyone knows he's there because of Lassia. He agreed, and she promised to help him find any info he needed, but he knew he couldn't ask her for another single favor after that. Aeen couldn't find any big clues and figured someone was definitely covering their tracks, while the girl warned that even though the artifact was off, the monsters were still freaking out. So, the girl was super hyped and asked if they were hunting monsters today, and he told her they definitely were. He reminded her they were in the woods where the magic had vanished, explaining that today was all about finding artifact clues instead of hunting monsters. So he told Ryu to call out if she felt any monsters or weird energy surges, and she was totally on board. She said it's tough to feel magic with a broken tool, but he just laughed because sensing a dead artifact is basically impossible for a normal person. Aeen asked which way the broken artifact was, but Ryu just looked around and admitted she was totally clueless. Tons of crazy strong magic was pulsing from all around them, so the guy decided they were going to scout every inch of the place. They jumped right into their plan, holding down the area and totally wiping out any monster that tried to step up. He knew he had to grab all that loot, but then he heard some crazy sounds that meant the girl was fighting off a massive horde of monsters all by herself. Aeen was getting super annoyed because she was wrecking enemies way faster than he could bag them up, and having to slow down was totally killing their flow. He figured he'd use magic to pull the bodies toward him and speed things up, but a sudden noise triggered everything to fly straight at him before he could even react. She's totally shocked and asks what he's doing, so Aeen explains, making him realize he's being a bit sloppy with his magic. He wonders if Ryu could use magic too. Rhea knew he could move way faster to grab everything, so she asked, "Wait, why isn't he using speed magic?" Aeen was totally shocked since she'd never heard of this, but then she realized it was the same magic she used to move, so she decided to pump her body full of mana to get a massive speed and power boost. She begged them not to just floor it and to be careful, suggesting they start with a tiny speed boost just to be safe. He stacked his speed magic and acceleration spells, but he barely moved away from Ryu before stopping, so he figured he just didn't use enough mana and decided to go for it again. This time he moves so fast that smoke starts kicking up everywhere, and the wind is so strong it sends Rhea's hair flying while she watches in total shock. But even he was going way too fast to stop and slammed straight into a tree, snapping the trunk in half and realizing this magic is actually a total pain to use. The girl rushed over to check on him, and while Kaede said he was totally fine, he was actually super confused why he didn't have a scratch on him. But Ryu knew it was all thanks to his clothes, even if Kaede hadn't figured it out yet. He remembered his gear could trade mana for a defense boost, but he wasn't sure if it was actually as tough as that high-rank Gower Dawn leather armor. Kaede gets a sudden idea and asks Rhea why the armor reacted to that tree, making her realize the magic is actually active all the time. He's blown away that the suit is constantly draining his mana, and Rhea confirms it, explaining that the armor actually grows stronger right alongside him. He was totally shocked to find out those clothes are actually beastly armor that gets way stronger the more mana he pumps into them. Rhea was totally confused why he didn't know about it, but he realized even the people in those outfits were clueless about this power. So now that everything finally clicked, Cade excitedly asked if he decided they'd level up by hunting monsters together, and she was totally hyped for it. He tried over and over to master that speed magic, but he kept slamming into trees and losing control, yet he refused to quit and just kept on grinding. He's running on fumes but refuses to give up, and the girl watching him is totally freaked out because she can tell something is seriously wrong. Kitad asked where the closest monster was, and the second the girl pointed it out, he charged straight for it. He finally realized that if he kept using magic to go faster and faster, he'd just end up slamming into something before he could even see it coming. You have to flick your magic on and off in a heartbeat because the monster nearby sensed danger and is now totally on edge. Suddenly, the kid blurs through the forest and closes the gap in a flash, leaving the monster totally frozen in fear. He sent the beast flying with a single hit, and it dropped dead right on the spot. He asked Rhea what she thought of his magic, but she told him his form looked totally weird. He promised. Out of nowhere, they felt this massive surge of weird magic nearby and just had to go see where it was coming from. They soon found these massive magic circles carved into the dirt. The whole place looked just like the old ruins of Herrera. And the crazy thing is, the object there was totally immune to. The girl was totally hyped when she saw those circles, and Kaid realized something huge must be hidden underneath, so he gave her major props for being so sharp. The guys spilled everything to Lassia, and she immediately started asking about what they found. Ryu thinks the whole thing is a total snooze fest, but the guy tells her to hang on while he explains a secret entrance 12 kilometers southwest that looks like a massive sealed lid. They headed down into the dungeon and found these ancient ruins that were totally trashed and falling apart. Everything was covered in burn marks, and all that fancy stuff was now just a charred mess of worthless junk and scrap metal. The girl was dying to know if there was actually something valuable hidden there, and Cade just nodded while pointing straight at a pedestal-shaped artifact. Right in the center of the room sat this massive round object, and the guy was totally convinced he was the one causing all the crazy stuff to happen. Kai spotted chunks of a massive magic stone nearby and realized they used to sit right on top of that pedestal. They take a closer look at the pedestal and realize it's actually just one piece of a super high-tech machine. They didn't know anything else about the gadget, but the guy realized this whole place was just a backup station for a way bigger system. Everything started going haywire because a huge magic stone got wrecked, and when Lassia found out, he was completely floored and started overthinking everything. He didn't think she'd talk even if she knew the truth, but she seemed totally clueless about the object and then asked a question of her own. He suddenly remembered what that guy said about the underground ruins being just a backup facility. Lassia thinks Kade and Ryu might already know everything since they're total pros at digging up info. They both actually had these powers, and she was 100% right about it. He was blown away that she figured it all out from just a few words, especially since his genius brain. Lassia was just trying to see what these guys were really capable of, and since they found those sick miners so fast, she's convinced someone's hiding a secret high-level analysis skill. Rice was totally shocked by what she saw, and while Kide was low-key worried she'd use his secrets against him, he had to admit that Lassia was actually super sharp. He realized he could finally trust her, so he decided to come clean and spill the beans about his secret powers. Lassia was totally down with his plan and said they'd go over the path to the ruins later, but he was honestly pretty confused about what she meant. She'd mentioned only the pro-adventurers and guild members knew the real deal, but she figured these guys should definitely be in the loop too. She couldn't spill all her secrets without her boss's permission, so she told them to stay patient and not expect too much. And as a nervous Kayate and Annie thanked her, he realized that this secret info was a massive problem, so he hoped the bosses would let him share it. But first, he had to raid the Orthon labyrinth to track down the main system. The next morning, while heading to work, Kaid asked Ria if she was okay or if she'd bumped her head during the night. She said she was totally fine, but admitted she secretly wished. He gave her a gentle head pat and asked if she was doing okay, and he was honestly so hyped when she told him she was finally getting used to everything. The girl asks where they're headed, so Kaid tells her they're hitting the guild to explore the labyrinth, but then a random duo stops them to ask what's up, and the girl, who actually works at the guild, tells them they need to head inside to talk. She explains that an archaeologist named Fiona San handpicked them to help explore some newly discovered ruins, but the guy is totally lost and Ryu admits she's never even heard of the woman. Turns out the award is totally optional, so they can just say no, but the letter says this person wants to join the action in secret. Coyote asks if the guy is with the guild, but he says nope. And Coyote can't believe a total stranger would nominate him at a time like this. He figured this might be one of Lassia's tricks, but since he was down to visit the night ruins anyway, he thanked the girl and promised to go see her. They're standing in front of a building that looks exactly like a fancy tofu shop, and Kade points it out to Ryu, but she's honestly just confused by what he's They're just about to walk in when she stops him and points at the magic field, saying it looks super weird, and even though he's worried it's a trap, she tells him it's probably fine. Ryu figured the door was the key to everything, and even though I was totally lost, he warned me that someone was using a magic item instead of a doorbell, so we had to stay ready for anything. They crept toward the door and slipped inside, but right then, a super friendly voice asked if Kade, San, or Ryu-chan were there. A girl shows up and tells them they look exactly like she heard, but she thinks their group setup is super weird. Kade was totally shocked when a fox beastman popped up out of nowhere, and when he asked if she was Fiona, she just gave him a huge grin and said yeah. He was totally caught off guard when he heard she actually picked him for a secret mission to check out those new ruins. The girl said yes and made it clear this had nothing to do with the guild. It was a totally private request. But these ruins are going to be way different than what Kade thinks, even though she really did find them herself. The way she's talking makes it look like Lassie set the whole thing up, and she's using a sneaky loophole to leak info that the guild usually keeps locked down tight just like a guild card. I asked Fiona about the ruins, and she warned me they're crawling with monsters. She actually tried to take them on alone before, but she ended up just running back in total fear. The guy was totally shocked that an archaeologist like her was pushing her limits, but Fiona just laughed it off, saying her stamina is actually insane. She told Kade to drop the formal act since she's not a VIP, and after he agreed, she warned him that artifacts alone won't be enough to conquer those ruins. She thought Ryu's hairpin might be the key, but she knew there was no way he'd just hand it over. Fiona told her not to worry though, because even if she wanted, Kade realized the hairpin was actually a powerful artifact and immediately wanted to know if it had any limits. I asked if every artifact had a lock, but Fiona said only the super strong ones do, because high-class gear picks its master the second it appears and won't work for. Kade was dying to know the rank of Ryu's hairpin, and while the girl said she'd need a closer look to be sure, she admitted it was the most perfect magical tool she'd ever seen. Fiona was totally blown away by the hairpin, and after she confirmed it was a legendary artifact, Kade realized Ryu was rocking something insane as the mystery only got deeper. He asked her what he'd get for helping out, and she promised that if he spent 3 days exploring the ruins with her, he could keep every single treasure they found. The guy was totally shocked by such a crazy good deal and got super interested, asking if it was too one-sided. But she promised it was totally fine because she only cared about exploring the... He was actually pretty shocked she knew so much about artifacts, even though her real passion was archaeology. Fiona admitted she only knew the basics about these ruins, so she asked the guys to. She explained that she wasn't bound by guild secrets and could spill everything, making him realize Lassie had found a genius loophole. Sharing info is totally allowed as long as it's not for a big investigation, so telling people what you found in the ruins won't break any secrecy rules. Fiona gets to explore the ruins while Cade scores all the secret info on the loot, and since he doesn't have to do any of the hard work, he's totally down. She told him they were leaving the second they were ready, and while the guy was totally shocked by how fast she moved, he didn't argue because she just wanted to get this over with. He could have stalled for 10 more years, but with a massive threat hanging over the world like a ticking bomb that could go off any second, he knew he had to move right now. They find a cave with a natural hot spring that has Rhea totally hyped, but Filney is seriously overheating. Cade asks if she senses anything weird, and she says she can feel if there's a pedestal with a magic stone, it's probably already smashed, and you just know it's packed with dangerous magic traps. The guy asks Fiona what her move is, and she tells him she was just checking to see if he really had the strongest defense of the whole group. Cade nervously agreed he was probably right. Then she walked up and handed him the magic tool, leaving him totally shocked as he started checking it out. She told him to head out first so she could follow behind and set up traps along the path. That was their whole plan, but hearing it left the guy completely blown away. He realized she was just using him as a human shield for traps since Fiona knew he was super tanky, but he had a feeling this item was actually legendary, so he decided to check its stats. This item basically blocks a killing blow once every 3 days, and Fiona totally knew the guy was about to get wrecked. He asks if she's got any secret moves or gear to stop the traps, but she just shakes her head and says she's got absolutely nothing. She'd heard all about their insane wins from the guild and was 100% sure they'd crush it, and while Rhea was totally hyped, Cade wasn't really feeling the plan at all. These two actually vibed perfectly and were way more alike than you'd think. So since our guy was a healer, he couldn't just let them rush into danger and basically had to go along. As they kept moving, Rhea spotted a magic trap on the left, but told everyone it wasn't a threat, leaving Cade totally baffled as he asked her how a trap could ever be considered safe. He let out a tired sigh and suggested they just walk around the trap, but right then, his foot accidentally stepped on something. Ryu saw the danger and shouted a warning, but he was too late. The trap snapped shut and fired an arrow right as Cade looked down at his feet, totally clueless. The arrow actually connected, but his clothes were so tough it just bounced right off, leaving the girls freaking out while he stood there totally confused about where it even came from. Cade thought the attack just failed, but the girl told him his defense was actually totally broken. Ryu couldn't sense anything because it wasn't magic, but the boy told her to stay cool while he realized the weak physical traps were just bait to make them get sloppy as he saw a ton of traps and decided to just set them all off at once to clear the way. And even though Fiona clearly hated the idea, she told him to go for it. So Koyate, he asks Ryu where the magic traps are hidden, and when she says one is literally right next to him, he totally loses it because he can't see it at all. If he can't see it, his analysis is totally useless, and Fiona says these traps are so well hidden that even she can't find a single one. The girl calls Rhea totally adorable, making her giggle, while Cade realizes he's got to count on her to find magic traps and asks how to shut them down. They tell him Rio told him he'd be totally fine, but warned him to dodge the traps ahead. So the boy asked Fiona what kind of crazy magic would go off if he actually stepped on one. She told them it all depends on the trap, because last time she was here, they'd spawn monsters or dump ice-cold water on her, and since they kept draining all her energy, she wouldn't dream of doing it herself. But Rhea kept begging him to, and since she obviously knew way more about magic, Cade finally gave in and stepped on them. The kid actually stepped right on the trap and froze up waiting for a disaster, but when nothing happened, Ryu explained that was exactly why she told him to do it. Cade's energy just deleted the trap's magic instantly. These hidden traps are actually pretty weak, so they didn't stand a chance. He had no clue what she was talking. Turns out he's actually dealt with this before, and while it sounds totally impossible, that's just a regular day for a guy like Kayet. As they're walking, they stumble onto a door that makes the girls stop dead in their tracks. He's worried the room is rigged with traps, but Fiona thinks it's just an old building, unless it's a secret military base. Then they're in for a world of hurt. He figured if the item was safe, there shouldn't be any traps inside. But even though the hallway was a total death trap, he decided to peek in anyway. The room looked decent enough, but Fiona noticed some super weird patterns on the walls and asked if he saw that the place was totally empty, since the guy who lived there escaped and probably left traps behind to wreck the object. Cade was totally over it and ready to bail, but Fiona begged him not to say stuff like that. Traps in the hallway usually mean treasure is nearby, but even without any loot, these ruins are still a massive find for researchers. There could be some seriously cool stuff hidden behind secret doors, or he asked if they were finished in the room. And since Fiona was done for now, he decided to head straight to the deepest part of the ruins to start making it safe, as long as he had enough food to keep him going. As they pushed further in, the hallways got super tight, the whole vibe shifted, and the ceiling was crazy high. Out of nowhere, Rhea felt something super weird and realized there was some creepy magic waiting for her right up ahead. Cade asks if this trap is anything new, but the girl just tells him to step on it since the magic feels weak, while Fiona wants to ditch him and run, and even though he hates that plan, he's stuck with it. The trap suddenly snaps shut, and Ryu warns the squad, but since his magic can't break it, Kaede wonders what kind of insane spell they've actually triggered. Suddenly, the ground starts shaking, and while the guy spins around totally clueless, the girls realize something massive is creeping up right behind them. It was a total trap. A massive wheel came barreling down the walls right at them, and the girls were so terrified they just froze up. She had to sprint for her life to avoid getting crushed by that wheel. But Ryu could tell this trap was a super weird mix of magic and machinery. Even though he was in total danger, the guy was actually hyped by how smart the trap was, while Cade yelled for the girls to keep running and stay focused on the threat. He popped his speed magic and rocketed down the hallway, leaving nothing behind but a massive cloud of dust. That move should have set off every single trap to stop him right there while the guy planned his next move. That metal wheel was still zooming after the girls who barely escaped, but instead of running, he turned around and walked right toward it with a crazy plan. He tells the girls he's got a plan, but Rhea stays on guard and asks if he even realizes that thing is basically impossible to break. Coyote wasn't trying to wreck the thing. He just wanted to use his magic to throw up a massive stone wall and stop it right there. The girls were totally stunned and couldn't believe their eyes, but that shock turned into pure terror when the wheel smashed through the wall and kept rolling straight for them. He screamed for the girls to run, and they bolted forward as fast as they could, totally terrified and trying not to cry. The wheel just kept picking up speed, and he realized the hill was making it move way too fast for his magic to stop it anymore. They managed to get some distance, and when he asked Rhea about a crossroad, she told him they were already on the left side. They hit a crossroads and spot a room, so he asks if any monsters are lurking inside. But Ryu promises it's totally empty, and when he rushes in, his jaw drops at what he was staring at something that magic couldn't even touch. Cade knew it was a total trap, but running away wasn't any safer, especially with that wheel closing in fast. As soon as they stepped inside, they realized they were totally stuck, and the guy told the girls to stay right there. He blasted the wall with his magic, but it didn't even leave a scratch. Ryu suddenly senses something and yells to Cade in a panic, looking up just as the entire ceiling comes crashing down with a massive bang. The guy watched in total shock as a massive pile of artifacts started pouring out of there. These are the Type 3 crushers, massive machines built to smash everything in their way. The second they landed, they went straight for the attack, leaving the guys totally confused and scrambling just to stay out of their way. These clunky machines tried to flatten them, but they were way too slow to land a hit. Cade asked Rhea how many buffs his stone spear needed to win, and when she said 20, he left the girls behind and told Rhea to keep Fiona safe while he used his speed magic to charge straight at the monsters. She watched him in total awe, and since his magic sword was useless against metal, he suddenly had a genius idea. He finally figured it out. He had to go straight for the crystals. He smashes the crusher and the artifact starts acting super weird. Cade laughs and tells him to try again, but then the pieces go totally haywire and start flying right at him. He couldn't break through their metal armor, but he could still stop them from moving. And after Cade promised to keep a worried Fiona safe, they just had to find a way out. He used his magic to summon a ton of massive stone spears and sent them flying right at the crushers. He wiped them all out with just one swing, opening a clear path straight to the exit. Fiona is totally blown away by his insane power, but he just shrugs it off, saying he's a traveler. Right before Ryu spots a magic stone that's clearly powering those machines and suggests they just smash it. He figured it was just a room, and as they walked down the hall, he told Rhea those machines totally wrecked him. She agreed, but then Kay suddenly heard Filney's voice. He looked over and saw her on her knees, totally losing it because those super important papers were ripped to shreds. They rigged their own building to explode, and both the girl and the boy were totally lost on what the person who made the trap was even trying to pull off. Out of nowhere, Rhea calls him over to help her move something, and it turns out she just needs him to lug around a heavy metal roller. He asked why she even wanted to move it since nothing was back there, but she told him to look underneath, and he was totally shocked by what he found. Cade agreed and yanked it off on the count of 3, leaving the girl totally shocked by what she found. Rhea found this epic sword and was totally gonna bring it to the guy, but the second she grabbed the handle, she started having second thoughts. The thing was actually way heavier than it looked, and when the guy tried to lift it himself, he was totally shocked. He actually managed to lift the heavy blade, leaving Fiona totally stunned as she realized the sword was using gravity powers. Ka was totally lost and just figured some weird magic effect was making him super heavy. He checked it out and realized it was a legit gravity sword that was insanely strong and could speed up gravity on every downswing. But since he didn't get the science behind it, Fiona figured the sword was totally OP, since Kaidi could actually swing it, especially since it's usually way too heavy for anyone to even pick up. A few random travelers had managed. He asked if she needed the sword for research since it was an artifact, but she told him it wasn't that rare and said he could just have it, so he totally took her up on the offer. Fiona decided they'd explored enough for one day and it was time to bounce, which totally surprised Cade. But Cade was really just using her to trigger all the traps so she could come back and raid the ruins properly later. As they headed back, Fiona was chatting away about how crazy the day was, but for once, everything was actually going her way and she was having a total blast. The girl suddenly clicks something, and both Rhea and Cade notice it right as the guys completely freeze up. Those Crusher guys were back, and even though Fiona felt bad for messing up, the guy told her it was totally fine because he was already planning their next move. The room was way too cramped to hit their crystals, so Rhea asked why he wasn't using that new sword yet. That huge sword didn't slow him down one bit, and it's definitely because of some crazy magic enchantment. Kade lunged straight at them and swung his massive blade, showing off its true power as he brought it crashing down. This sword is way more powerful than the wizard's, and it just sliced those artifacts to bits with a single swing. Kaisen was totally obsessed with this sword. Fiona thanked the guys for their hard work, and since they were back in one piece, she told them it was time to plan their next move. Rhea asked if they were finished, but he told her they were still hunting for any info they could find about those destroyed artifacts. Kade asked if she found any clues about the earthquake, and she said yeah, but it's got nothing to do with what's going on here. The boy thought they'd done all that work for nothing, but he was way off. And then Fiona asked if he knew a guy named Redamos. The guy said no and asked if that was just a name, but she said yeah and told him the full name was Redamos Orthon. In this world, only nobles get last names, and since Fiona said his name is Orthon, the name of a whole city, our guy wonders if he's actually the local lord and if she told him not to worry because everything was totally fine, explaining that back in the city, everyone treated him like absolute trash since he wasn't even the real boss yet, just the guy next. Fiona explains that since the ruler Forso left for the capital a month ago, Redamos took over and went completely wild, demanding insane taxes, looting shops, and even killing innocent people on fake charges just to do whatever he wanted. Kade was totally shocked and asked if he was just some criminal trash, but she explained that since both sides agreed to the duel, it's actually 100% legal. In this world, killing someone in a duel is totally legal, so when the guy asked how this man was linked to the earthquake, she told him Redamos had banned the guild from leaking any info. She was convinced he was the one who shut down the earthquake investigation and stole the money, making life a total nightmare for everyone. So Kite told her he got the picture but wanted to hear the rest. He asked her straight up what she wanted to do with the guy, and after a long sigh, she said she still wanted him to pay. She was so desperate that she straight up admitted she'd be happy if the guy just finished him off. Kade was worried about becoming a criminal if he finished him off, but Fiona explained that Redamos was a total bully who killed people in duels, so Kade could just... Everyone thinks rank equals power, but he's the only adventurer staying at rank E, and he's totally ready to take out anyone who taxes people into the ground or breaks ancient artifacts. He asked for some time to think it over, so she just had to roll with it. Taking out the deputy lord was a massive deal, and even though he knew Fiona wasn't lying, he had to be absolutely sure before he officially took the job. He figured he'd scout the city for info and just go see the guy, but then he realized he didn't even know what the dude looked like. And right as he's thinking that, something crazy goes down and he stops to check it out. Some random guy holding a bag starts calling him a nasty old man, telling him he should be grateful he's even allowed to give his taxes straight to Mr. Redamos. Kade suddenly realized this was the exact same guy Fiona told him about. He walked up to the locals to ask what the deal was, but the shopkeeper figured he was just a clueless traveler and warned him to stay far away. The merchant explains that this is Redamos's go-to move. He finds a target, jacks up their taxes by 10 times, and if they can't pay, he takes all their stuff until he eventually steals their entire shop. The guy warned everyone not to even think about getting in his way, because if they tried, he'd just claim they insulted him and force them into a duel to the death. And after seeing how many people died for standing up to him, Kaede realized this dude was straight up trash. This basically confirmed the rumors were true, and he really was the one who trashed those artifacts. The guy just sighed, saying he was totally done with this crap and needed Forzan to get by. He called him a worthless peasant for talking smack and asked if he was ready to pay the price for his big mouth. He challenged him to a duel in the name of Redamos, totally sure he was going to take the win. The guy warned Kaede to stay back so he wouldn't get dragged into the mess, but Redamos called him crazy since nobody actually wants to die. He was ready to let him off the hook if he paid a massive tax and just dropped it. But when the guy tried to argue, Kaya felt super awkward while Rhea just hid her face. Turns out she was only holding her nose because this guy smelled absolutely terrible. The guy was sweating bullets and tried to explain himself, but everyone just started cracking up. Redamos looked around at the laughing crowd, and once he realized what was going on, he was absolutely fuming. The guy calls Rhea a total brat and claims it's actually a noble scent, getting super aggressive about her calling it stinky and deciding to make an example out of her to teach everyone a lesson. The second he tried to get near her, Kaed tripped him and sent him crashing straight to the ground. The kid was a total noob at RPGs, and even though Cade agreed the perfume was nasty, he thought the smell was actually coming from him and said it smelled like straight up. Rhea's totally shocked by how he's acting and the fact that he's shirtless, but Cade just says he ditched the gear to look way weaker than Redamos. He jumped up and started talking trash, making the guy think a fight was coming. So he mocked the spoiled noble for being weak until Kaidi asked if he could actually handle the strongest E-rank adventurer around. Redamos didn't catch his rank at first, but once it clicked, he flashed a huge grin, knowing Keita and those other idiots were about to find out exactly what happens when you mess with him.